Paranormal M family. How's your day going? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Thank you so much for sharing so many of your paranormal experiences with me, and please keep them coming. Now, let's dive into today's paranormal stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Good night. I want to tell you about something that happened to me recently, and even now, I still don't know what to make of it. I'm a disabled woman from South Asia, and for a while now, my living situation has been pretty unstable. My income comes and goes, so I've had to move between shelters, women's hostels, and PG accommodations. If you're not familiar with that, a PG is basically a paying guest setup, where you rent a room or even just a bed in someone's home. Usually, the family lives there too, and sometimes meals are included. It's a very common arrangement where I'm from. At the moment, I'm staying with a family of 6 in a 2-floor house. There's the couple, their children, and the wife's elderly mother. My room is upstairs, and I use a cane to get around, so I don't move quickly or easily. That day, the grandmother and the landlord's wife had gone to the hospital for a medical appointment. The landlord had taken the children out, so by the afternoon, I was completely alone in the house. Now, I usually don't mind being by myself. I actually enjoy quiet most of the time. But that afternoon, the silence felt wrong. The house is normally full of voices, movement, doors opening and closing, the TV, somebody calling for somebody else. With all of that gone, the place felt unnaturally still. I remember feeling like something was off, like I wasn't really alone, even though I knew I was supposed to be. I tried to ignore it. I sat down and did the usual things, checked emails, looked through job listings, tried to stay focused on ordinary tasks. And then I heard it. Someone called out, "Mole!" That's a Malayalam word older people use affectionately, like saying, "dear girl," or "daughter." And the voice sounded exactly like the grandmother's. So of course, my first thought was that maybe she and the wife had come back earlier than expected. It wasn't common for her to come upstairs because her knees were very bad, but it wasn't impossible either. The children's room was on the same floor as mine, so I thought maybe she had come up looking for them and didn't realize they were out. I got up slowly, leaning on my cane, and opened my door. There was no one there. The hallway was empty, completely quiet. And I just stood there, confused, because there was no way she could have called me and then gone back downstairs that fast. She struggled with movement as much as I did, maybe more. I told myself maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe my mind was reacting to the strange silence. Then I heard it again. This time it came from the side, near the utility area next to my room. I answered back as best I could. I have a speech impairment, so calling out loudly isn't easy for me, but I tried. By then I was getting nervous. My mind immediately went to the worst possibility. Maybe the grandmother had fallen somewhere near the terrace. Without really thinking, I stepped out and pulled my room door shut behind me. I still think about that moment. I don't know why, but closing that door felt important somehow. The utility area has the washing machine and some storage, and beyond it, there's an open terrace. During the day, that door is usually left open for air and sunlight. So I walked that way, squinting because the afternoon light was so harsh. And again, there was no one. No grandmother, no movement, nothing. Then suddenly I heard a huge crashing sound from downstairs. She replied that they were still at the hospital and wouldn't be back until evening. She also reminded me that the house had been locked when they left. That message made my stomach drop, because if they weren't home, then who had called me? And what had made that crashing sound downstairs? At that point, I decided I was not opening my door again for anything. I did a small protection visualization, just something that helps me feel grounded, and stayed where I was. But a little later, I heard the voice again. Same word, same tone, same grandmother's voice. I can't really explain the feeling that came over me. It was like cold fear going straight through my body. And that's when a thought came into my mind that I really didn't want to entertain. What if it was a mimic? I've had other experiences in my life that made me feel sensitive to paranormal things, so once that idea entered my head, I couldn't shake it. It felt like something was trying to draw me out of my room, and the feeling of being watched only got stronger. So I stayed put. I locked the door, played music to drown out every little sound, and kept checking the latch every so often just to reassure myself it was still secure. I got almost no work done after that. I was too shaken. When the family finally came back that evening, I can't tell you how relieved I felt. The house sounded normal again. Voices, footsteps, doors, all the everyday noise came back, and with it, that awful feeling started to lift. Later on, I found out that an old wall clock had somehow come loose and fallen downstairs. So that explains the crashing sound at least. But the voice? I still have no explanation for that. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Maybe the strange silence got into my head. Maybe I imagined hearing her call me. But I remember it so clearly, and not just once. I heard that voice 3 separate times, and I still find it unsettling that the clock fell while I was near the terrace, right after I'd been drawn out there. So I honestly don't know. Was it stress? Was it my imagination? Or was something trying to lure me outside? I still think about it, and I still don't know what to believe. So, this happened a few years ago, when I was living in an old Victorian terraced house for a couple of years with my children. It was one of those places with a really strange layout because it was built into the side of a hill. You'd come in from the street through the front door, and on that level were the 2 bedrooms my boys used. Then upstairs from there was my room and my youngest daughter Ava's room. She was only about 3 then. And below the street level, down another set of stairs, was the kitchen and living area, with a little sunroom at the back that opened into the garden. From the very beginning, that house just felt off. That's the only way I can explain it. It never felt cozy or settled. It had this heaviness to it, like the air was thick somehow, especially at night. Around that time, I was living there mostly on my own with the kids after separating from my ex-husband, so I kept trying to tell myself I was just stressed and overtired. At first, it was little things. I'd hear what sounded like faint whispering and then complete silence. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and catch the quickest glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, and when I turned, there'd be nothing there. And more than anything, I always had this horrible feeling that I was being watched. I tried not to let myself focus on it because I didn't want to frighten myself. I was there alone with the children most of the time, and I needed to keep it together. But then something happened that I still can't explain, even now. My oldest son, Mason, was about 8 or 9 at the time, and he'd become obsessed with the idea of starting his own YouTube channel. He was always filming little videos in his room, just silly clips, and I'd check them before he uploaded anything. His bedroom was at the front of the house. His bed was pushed up against the wall under the window, and we always kept the curtains shut because the house sat close enough to the street that it felt exposed. They were thick, dark curtains that met in the middle. One day I was watching back one of his videos, and there was this tiny moment where the camera slowed just enough for me to catch something near the curtains. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, so I rewound it and watched it again. Then I started going through it frame by frame. And honestly, I still get chills thinking about it. What I saw looked like an arm. Not just a shadow, not the curtain shifting, An actual arm and hand seemed to come out from the narrow gap where the curtains met, reaching toward the pillow end of my son's bed. I remember just staring at the screen, thinking, no, that can't be right. But the more I replayed it, the more certain I felt about what I was seeing. The window itself was raised above street level, so it wouldn't have made sense for someone outside to cast that kind of shape across the curtains anyway. At the time, I took screenshots and sent them straight to my sister along with the video. I didn't say much because I didn't want to influence what she saw, but almost immediately she said she could see it too. That was the moment everything changed for me in that house. Up until then, I'd been trying to rationalize all the strange feelings and little incidents. But seeing that on video and having someone else confirm it made me feel, for the first time, like there really was something wrong there. And to be honest, that was more than enough. I need to tell you about something that happened around 12 years ago when I was finishing high school. Even now when I think about it, I still get that strange feeling in my chest, like part of me is back there. At the time, I had two separate circles of friends. They knew of each other, but we never really all spent time together. One Friday night, right before the weekend, I went to a party at this huge house with my boyfriend and my best friend. There were people everywhere, music, noise, the usual kind of crowded night. But the second I walked in, I felt completely off. Not in a dramatic way at first, just this heavy, sinking feeling. I didn't drink. I didn't really talk much. I just followed them around like I was there physically, but not really there at all. As the night went on, it got worse. I felt deeply sad, almost panicked, and then nauseous too, even though I barely ate a thing. By around 1 in the morning, I kept begging them to leave because I couldn't take it anymore. Eventually we did, and the three of us ended up crashing in the same bed at my friend's place. They fell asleep, but I didn't sleep for a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw these violent, horrifying flashes. Blood, broken bodies, people suffering. It wasn't just that I was seeing them. It felt like I was somehow creating them, like I was responsible for those images, and that made me feel sick with guilt. I remember lying there in the dark, crying as quietly as I could so I wouldn't wake anyone up. Early the next morning, I left without really explaining much. I just wanted to go home and see my mom. I had this desperate need for her to hold me and tell me everything was okay. When I got there, that's exactly what I did. I tried to explain what had happened, and she told me it was probably stress, exhaustion, maybe anxiety catching up with me. After I ate a little and stopped feeling sick to my stomach, I tried to rest. But the images came back. Later that day, I called the friend I'd been with the night before and asked if she wanted to go out for a bit. I thought maybe getting out of the house would help. We met up, walked around some shops, just trying to have a normal afternoon. I didn't tell her what had really happened. I was too ashamed, and honestly, I didn't even know how to put it into words. Then something happened that made everything feel even stranger. We were about to cross the street when a scooter rode past us. The guy driving it had square glasses and brown, slightly wavy hair peeking out from under his helmet. He turned his head and smiled at us as he went by. My friend nudged me and joked that he was obviously checking me out. I laughed awkwardly and said, with total certainty, "No way, that's Soraya's brother." She laughed and told me that was impossible. He lived in Paris, she said. He was always working. There was no reason he'd be there. And that's when the fear really hit me. You need to understand, at that time, I was supposed to do an internship at the graphic design studio run by my friend Soraya's older brother. I knew what he looked like, and I was suddenly absolutely sure I had just seen him. I stopped walking and told my friend I needed to go home. She looked confused, but she could tell something was wrong, so she let me go. The second I got home, I went straight to my mother, crying and shaking. I told her everything this time. The party, the sickness, the images, the scooter, all of it. My mom has always been very open-minded, especially about things people can't easily explain. She told me that my grandmother had been sensitive to things like that too. Then she asked me to sit down on her bed, close my eyes, and try to clear my mind, so I did. After a little while, she asked me, "What do you see?" I said, "Nothing." Then she said, "Think of a letter." And immediately one came to me. It felt absurd because the moment I saw it in my mind, I already knew exactly who it connected to. She told me to say it out loud, so I half laughed and said, "It's the letter S." She asked what that meant to me, and I said, "It's strange because it makes me think of Soraya, and earlier I thought I saw her brother on that scooter." My mother's face changed right away. She told me to call Soraya. I didn't want to. I told her that would be way too weird. We weren't close enough for me to suddenly call her out of nowhere, and I didn't even have her number anymore. But my mother insisted. She told me to get it from a mutual friend. So eventually I did. I called. She answered almost immediately, and the second I heard her voice, something dropped inside me. I asked very awkwardly, "Are you okay?" She sounded stunned, almost irritated, and said, "Why are you calling me?" And then, without any lead-up at all, she said, "No, I'm not okay. Milo killed himself." Milo was her brother. I just broke. I started crying right there on the phone and apologizing over and over, even though I barely knew what I was apologizing for. She started crying too, and then she asked me why I had called her at that exact moment, because he had died the night before. The night I had been awake, vomiting, seeing those unbearable flashes. I told her everything. I told her about the party, about not being able to sleep, about the images, and about seeing someone who looked exactly like him on a scooter that afternoon. She told me he did have a scooter in Paris, but he had died there the day before. So what I saw made no sense. I was terrified she would think I was cruel or unstable, or that she'd never want to speak to me again. But that's not what happened. A few days later, she came to my house, and I told her the whole story in person. She told me more about her brother, about what had happened, and about the note he left behind. She was actually a very rational person, not someone who usually believed in things like signs or unexplained connections. But she never once doubted that what I told her was real to me. And from that moment on, something changed between us. We formed this incredibly deep bond, built out of grief, mystery, and a shared sense that something had happened that neither of us could fully explain. Even now, all these years later, that story still stays with us. And honestly, I think it always will. So a few months ago, a group of us rented this cabin by a quiet lake for the weekend. Later that night, some friends and I went down to a little bar nearby. My wife, Mara, stayed back at the house by herself. I barely drank anything, maybe a beer or two, and when I got back, I was just tired and ready to crash. I walked into the bedroom, and it was almost completely dark. The only thing I could really make out was the shape of Mara lying in bed. I slipped in beside her, facing her, and for a second I thought she looked off. Like maybe she was sitting up a little, or leaning forward in some strange way. So I whispered, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then I heard her answer me. But her voice didn't come from where I thought I was looking. It came from lower down, from where her head actually was on the pillow. That's the moment every part of me went cold. I kept staring into the dark, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and little by little, I realized it wasn't Mara at all. Whatever I was looking at was standing at the edge of the bed, leaning over us. It was tall, way too tall. maybe 8 feet, maybe more. Just this black shape, darker than the room itself. And as I stared at it, it didn't step closer exactly. It was more like its face stretched toward me, slowly, deliberately, until it was right there, inches from mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was completely frozen. All I could do was look at it. Its eyes were tiny and orange, like glowing beads, and its pupils looked pin-sharp and black. I didn't even fully process the rest of its face in that moment because I was so locked in on those eyes. Then Mara looked at me and said, "What? Did you see something?" And I just said, "I don't want to say anything." She immediately sat up and said, "No, you need to tell me if you saw something." I admitted that I had, but I still couldn't bring myself to explain what it was. I just told her, "Please don't panic. Just try to relax." But she was already scared. I could feel it. So we both got up and hurried out into the main room, where everyone else was still hanging out. The second we got out there, Mara said, "Okay, I need to tell y'all something. While you were gone, I kept feeling like someone was outside the bedroom door." She started describing how she could see a little strip of light under the door, and every so often, it looked like there were feet standing on the other side. Just standing there, not moving. She said it happened more than once, like someone had been lingering outside the room for hours. Then she said she'd drift off, wake up again, and sometimes the shadow would be gone. But one time, she said, she saw something else. She said it looked like a figure crawling low across the floor toward the bed on all fours. And then she described its face. She said it had these tiny orange eyes and this huge grin full of jagged teeth. I just stopped breathing, because that was exactly what I had seen, and I had not told her any of those details. Not one. Up until then, I hadn't said a word about the eyes, or the face, or anything. So hearing her describe the same thing in front of everybody just shook me in a way I can't really explain. Some of our friends kind of laughed nervously, like maybe she was messing with them, or maybe we were just freaked out from being in an unfamiliar place. But I wasn't laughing. I couldn't. I was just sitting there, staring into space, trying to process the fact that whatever I saw, she had seen too. And then, before I could even tell her that, we all heard something slam onto the floor in that bedroom. Not a soft sound, a sharp, clear drop. Enough that everyone heard it. There was nothing there. Nothing on the floor, nothing out of place. No cup, no phone, no book, no loose object. Nothing. The room looked exactly the way we'd left it. That somehow made it worse. The next day, we found out there was a small old burial plot behind the cabin, fenced off near the back tree line, almost directly outside the bedroom window where we had been sleeping. I don't know what to make of that, and I'm not trying to claim I have some explanation. Maybe there's folklore tied to that land. Maybe there isn't. I honestly still don't know. What I do know is that Mara and I both saw something that night, and even now, telling this story out loud still gives me chills. I really haven't talked about it much since it happened, because every time I do, it takes me right back to that room, to that darkness, and to that face leaning in close enough to touch mine. I want to share something that happened to me when I was around 13, during one of the darkest times in my life. Back then, I was carrying so much anger. My home life was painful, and my father was abusive. I was full of violent thoughts, and I was in such a broken state of mind that I was even imagining doing something terrible to him. I'm only sharing that because I think it matters to understand where I was emotionally. I was deeply drawn to dark things then. I loved to draw, but most of what came out of me was death, bodies, shadows, always in black, white, and red. Then one afternoon, I was sitting at home drawing like I usually did. I wasn't planning anything specific. I rarely did. I just let my hand move and followed whatever showed up. But that day, something different happened. Instead of another dark image, I started drawing a flower. And not just that, it had color. Soft, vivid color. I remember pausing and thinking how strange that felt, because it was so unlike anything I normally made. That's when I became aware of this bright light in front of me. It was almost like a spotlight, but not harsh, just incredibly strong and impossible to ignore. I was completely awake. I wasn't dreaming, and it didn't feel imaginary in the moment. The presence felt ancient, older than anything I could explain. It didn't speak with words exactly. It was more like thoughts arriving directly in my mind, and sometimes it communicated through images instead. The first thing it asked was whether it could come in. I remember being unsure. A part of me wondered whether saying yes might be a mistake, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt calm, steady, almost kind. So even though I didn't really understand what it meant, I said yes. The moment I agreed, I was overwhelmed by this feeling of love. Real love. The kind that is so deep and complete that it almost breaks you open. I had never felt anything like it before. It was like every hateful, bitter part of me was being seen and held without judgment. I started asking questions the way a young teenager would. I asked if it was an angel. I had gone to Catholic school, even though I wasn't really religious, so that was the first thing that came to mind. It said no. Then I asked if it was God. Again, no. So I asked, then what are you? And somehow, it showed me, but not in a way I could really understand. What I saw or sensed was something ancient beyond language, something that felt older than history, older even than time itself. I know that sounds impossible, but that's the closest description I have. I asked other questions too. Why is there so much suffering in the world? Why are we here? What is the point of any of this? I honestly can't remember all of the answers now. A lot of it faded, almost like it was meant to. But I do remember being shown things, images, pieces of the world, moments that felt real and alive, as if I were seeing beyond myself for a little while. At some point, my mother came into the room, and I remember thinking, why can't she see this? That was the first moment I realized whatever was happening was somehow happening inside my awareness, even though it felt completely real. Before it left, it told me something that stayed with me forever. It said that one day I would try to take my own life, and it asked me not to do it. It made me promise. At that age, that thought had never really crossed my mind, so hearing that felt shocking and distant. But I promised anyway. When the presence left, I felt different, truly different. It was as if something heavy and poisonous had been washed out of me. I felt clean inside, lighter. The rage that had consumed me didn't vanish all at once forever, but something in me had changed. I was not the same person after that day. I remember asking whether I would ever see it again. I don't remember the response, but I assume it was no, because I never did. Years later, there was a time when I did try to end my life. And in that moment, I remembered the promise I had made all those years before. That memory is part of why I'm still here. I also didn't fully keep my promise to stop searching. Over the years, I looked for people who had experienced something similar. I found strange connections, stories that echoed parts of mine, and questions I still can't answer. Even now, I can't tell you exactly what that presence was. I only know what it did. It met me in a moment when I was full of darkness, and for a brief time, it replaced that darkness with something I had never known before. Love, peace, and the sense that maybe my life was meant to continue. What happened to my mother is still really hard for me to put into just one word. It wasn't exactly a premonition, not in the usual sense. It wasn't like she felt something terrible was about to happen. It was more like she somehow stepped into the weight of something terrible that had already happened, years before she was ever there. This took place a long time ago, and I'm not sharing it because I expect answers. Honestly, I just want to tell it the way it was told to me, because it stayed with me. My mother, Marina, was born in Greece and lived there until she was 18. When she was around 15, she took a trip with her father, her uncle, and aunt, and 2 cousins to my grandfather's village in the Peloponnese, in southern Greece. They were traveling from Larissa, where my mother had grown up, so it was a long journey. At one point, the family stopped in a mountain village to rest before continuing on. While everyone else settled in for a while, my grandfather invited my mother to come take a short walk with him. She went happily. She had been enjoying the trip, enjoying the company, and there was nothing wrong with her mood at all. She wasn't upset, anxious, or troubled in any way. But during that walk, my grandfather led her toward a hill at the edge of the village. And as they got closer, everything changed. She told me that out of nowhere, this awful feeling came over her. Not just fear, but something deeper. A crushing sadness, panic, dread. She said it felt like her heart was being squeezed. The closer they came to that hill, the worse it got, until she finally told my grandfather she couldn't bear it. He immediately turned around and brought her back down to a nearby tavern where the rest of the family was waiting. Even the owner noticed something was wrong with her. Once she had a moment to sit down, she tried to explain what she had felt near that hill, how sudden it was, how overwhelming, how completely out of place it seemed. When she finished, my grandfather and the tavern owner looked at her very seriously and told her what had happened there. The village was Kalavrita. During the German occupation of Greece in World War II, the town suffered one of the worst atrocities in the country. After German soldiers were killed in the area, the occupying forces retaliated against the people of Kalavrita. They looted homes, seized animals and supplies, and gathered the civilians. Then they took the male population, from teenage boys to elderly men, up to that hill and executed them. Hundreds were killed there in a single massacre, and only a handful survived. What has always stayed with me is this. When my mother stood near that hill, there was no memorial there yet. No sign, no marker, nothing to tell her what had happened. She didn't know the history, and my grandfather hadn't had the chance to explain it before that feeling hit her. So whatever she felt it without being told. And that's the part I keep coming back to. It unsettles me, of course it does. But it also fascinates me. Because somehow, for one brief moment, it was as if my mother brushed up against the memory of that place before anyone ever spoke it aloud. Hey, I'm sharing this because maybe someone out there has gone through something similar, and maybe hearing this will make them feel a little less alone. I know some people would probably hear me talk about this and assume I'm unstable or completely detached from reality, but I've seen several mental health professionals, 4 actually, and every one of them told me the same thing. I'm grounded. I know what's real around me. That's part of what makes this so hard to explain. When this first started, I told myself it had to be connected to substance use. That seemed like the only explanation that made any kind of sense. So after a few months, I checked myself into rehab, honestly believing things would clear up once I got clean. But they didn't. They got worse. At first, I thought maybe I had damaged my brain somehow. I kept trying to make it fit into something understandable. But as time passed, it stopped feeling like something I could explain away. It felt like I was living with voices that had no right to be there. Different ones came and went, a few sounding familiar, but there was one main male voice that stayed constant. And somehow, they seemed able to shift in intensity, sometimes quieter when I was talking to someone, sitting in an appointment, or trying to focus, and other times unbearably loud, like they just didn't care how overwhelmed I was. Before all of this, I had never experienced anything like auditory or visual hallucinations. Not once in my life. And the substance I had been using wasn't even something people normally associate with that kind of thing, which only made it more confusing. About 3 months in, I entered treatment. Even there, the therapists and psychologists couldn't really explain why things kept escalating instead of settling down. I remember leaving rehab after more than a month sober, hoping that would be the turning point. But the voices were still there. If anything, they were sharper, meaner, more constant. And now, here I am many months later, and they still haven't let up. They almost never answer me directly. Most of the time, they just repeat things back to me, or twist my own thoughts into something cruel. In the beginning, I tried so hard to turn it into something useful. I thought, maybe if this is making me more aware of my negative thoughts, I can use that awareness to grow. And for a while, I actually did. I worked hard to change the way I spoke to myself. But eventually, the exhaustion caught up with me. Because this isn't just frightening, it's draining. Completely draining. It feels like being invaded in the one place you always thought was untouchable. And when the worst thoughts you've ever had are thrown back at you, again and again, day after day, eventually it wears you down. It takes the life out of you. Over time, it's felt like whatever this is has changed. It's not just voices anymore. Sometimes it feels like thoughts show up that don't belong to me. Other times, it's like my own thinking gets interrupted or redirected, almost like someone reaching into the middle of a sentence and changing where it ends. That part is especially hard to describe, because I know how strange it sounds. But it's real to me. It's terrifying. And maybe one of the loneliest parts is that I don't feel like I can talk about it openly. I feel isolated, lost, worn down. I feel like I've been pushed so far from myself that I hardly recognize the person trying to survive this. I was raised believing that no matter what happened in life, your mind was the one place no one could ever take from you. That your thoughts were your own. So living through something that makes that feel untrue has shaken me to my core. I've also known people with schizophrenia, and what I'm going through doesn't match what I've personally seen in them. I'm not losing my grip on reality. I know where I am. I know what day it is. I can still function, at least on the surface, but less and less as time goes on. The constant pressure of this, from the moment I wake up to the moment I fall asleep, and even in my dreams, has worn me down to almost nothing. I wish I had answers. I really do. I've spent month after month researching, asking questions, trying treatments, pleading for relief, begging for this to stop. And I still don't know what this is, or why it's happening, or how to make it end. The only reason I'm telling this now is because maybe somebody listening has felt this same kind of fear and confusion. Maybe somebody else is sitting alone with something they can't explain, thinking no one could possibly understand. And I just want to say, I hear you. You're not the only one struggling to make sense of something that feels unbearable. I hope there's an answer somewhere. I hope there's a way through this. And I hope that whatever is behind this pain, whatever name it eventually gets, can someday be understood, and that the people living through it can finally get their lives back. Because that's all I want. I just want my mind to feel like mine again. I want to tell you about someone I loved very much. I'll call her Jade. She died by suicide almost 4 years ago, and honestly, The kind of grief that follows something like that is hard to explain unless you've lived it. There was so much pain, so many questions, and so much healing that all of us had to work through just to begin making sense of what happened and how deeply it affected us. Since she passed, a lot of us have felt like she still reaches out in little ways. Some of the signs have been subtle, some impossible to ignore. And this is one of the experiences that stayed with me most. Back in late fall of 2024, I opened Snapchat and started looking through my memories. The second I clicked into that section, the app started acting strange. It was glitching in a way I'd never seen before, and after maybe 10 seconds, a picture of Jade and me opened all by itself. I just sat there staring at it. Then, about a week later, I dreamed about her. I'd only dreamed of her once since she passed, so this was rare. And this dream felt unbelievably real. We were just together, hanging out like old times, talking like nothing had changed. I remember feeling confused the entire time, thinking, "You're supposed to be gone." But there she was, so present, so familiar, like no time had passed at all. I didn't think too much of it afterward. I just kept moving through the week. Then that Friday, one of our mutual friends, I'll call him Joel, messaged me and said Jade's boyfriend, who I'll call Antonio, had a fight that night and asked if I wanted to come. Antonio, Joel, and I had all been friends for years, and Antonio was actually the reason we met Jade in the first place. So I went, mostly because I wanted to support him. Jade's sister was there too. I'll call her Emmy. After the match, Antonio won, and Emmy was so happy. She kept telling everyone, "My little sister's boyfriend won." She was glowing. Then she invited us all back to her place to celebrate. Later that night, after we'd all settled in and had a few drinks, Emmy suddenly said, "I had a dream about my sister this week. It felt so real. I was looking into her eyes and touching her hair." Before I could even process that, Antonio said, "I dreamed about her this week too. We were just hanging out and talking." I remember sitting there in complete shock. Then I told them I dreamed about her too. Emmy just smiled at us while we talked. Joel looked stunned. 3 of us, all dreaming about Jade around the same time, all saying the same thing, that it felt real. That's when Emmy started telling us how often Jade sends signs. She said, "My sister loves messing with lights and technology. If I'm having a hard day and I ask her for a sign, later on the lights in my house will start flickering." That hit me hard because I'd had my own strange experiences too. I shared them, and Joel shared some of his. Emmy just listened with this calm, knowing smile and said, "She's always around." We all cried that night. Every single one of us. Then about a week later, something happened that I still can't fully explain. When I came back, I picked up my phone to call him and say I was ready. I opened my recent calls and just froze. The last outgoing call on my phone was to Jade. Not my friend, not a misdial to someone living. Jade. I felt my whole body go cold. I called my friend back nearly in tears. I've had signs from her before, but something that direct? That almost never happens. I was trying to pull myself together while I talked to him, and when he got there, the first thing he said was, "Why is the light on in the room next to yours?" I said, "You mean the living room?" He said, "No, the other room, the one farther down." That's when I realized he was talking about my parents' bedroom. My parents had left for a trip over a week earlier. No one had gone into that room since they left. And immediately, I thought about what Emmy had said. how Jade liked to play with lights. So I walked down the hall, opened the door, saw the light on, and just stood there for a second. Then I switched it off and went on with my night. But inside, I knew. She still watches over me, over our friends, over her family. And whatever love really is, I believe this much with my whole heart. It does not end just because someone dies. So this all started about a year and a half ago, right after my family moved again. My dad's in the military, so moving around was just a normal part of life for us. We were staying in an apartment at first. Nothing unusual, just the usual temporary setup while everything got sorted out. A few nights after we got there, I was sitting on the couch watching TV with my brothers and sister. Everything felt completely normal until, out of nowhere, I got this strange feeling, like something had entered the room through the window. I turned and looked right away, but the window was shut and locked. My siblings were sitting right beside me, so it wasn't any of them moving around. Then, just a moment later, I felt that same presence again, except this time it seemed to be near the door across the room. When I looked over, the door was actually shifting a little, like it had been nudged. I remember feeling unsettled, but I told myself it was nothing. About 2 weeks later, we moved into a house not far from that apartment complex. For the first few nights, I was sleeping alone in my room on a borrowed air mattress. That's when I started hearing it. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing, like someone was standing right beside me in the dark. At first, I thought maybe the mattress had a leak or something, but I checked, and it definitely wasn't that. Even after I got a regular mattress, the sound kept happening. Only at night. Only when I was alone. I tried to explain it away, tried to find some logical cause, but I never could. After a while, I kind of trained myself to ignore it. I didn't like it, but I got used to it. Then one night, I looked toward the corner of my room and saw a figure standing there. Just still. Watching me. I can't even explain the fear I felt in that moment. I was frozen. I didn't scream, didn't move, didn't do anything. The next morning, I convinced myself it had to be sleep paralysis. That made the most sense, because surely if someone had really been standing in my room, I would have reacted, right? For a few days, nothing happened. Then one afternoon, I went walking in the woods near our neighborhood. There was this trail people used sometimes, and I'd gone there just to clear my head. At one point, between the trees, I saw the same figure. The exact same shape I'd seen in my room. I remember staring, trying to make sense of it, and when I stepped closer, it was just gone. That night, it came back. Same corner, same silence, same feeling that the room wasn't mine anymore. But this time, it didn't stay there. It moved closer, slowly, until it was standing right next to my bed, just staring down at me. And again, I did nothing. I was too scared to even breathe properly. The next morning, I told myself the same thing I had before: sleep paralysis, bad dream, overactive imagination, anything to make it feel less real. But the night after that was different. I woke up and it was already there, standing over me. I could feel it before I even opened my eyes all the way. Then it leaned down and reached toward my face. The second it touched me, I felt this rush of fear so intense it didn't even feel human. It was pure terror, deeper than anything I had ever known. I jerked awake fully, and even though I was definitely conscious then, the fear didn't go away. It stayed. I turned on the light immediately and sat there for the rest of the night, too afraid to go back to sleep. It took me at least an hour, maybe longer, before I could even think clearly again. I still don't know what really happened. Maybe there's a rational answer. maybe there isn't. All I know is that after that night, whatever it was never came back. Later on, I started hearing other stories from people around the neighborhood. Different people, different experiences, but the details were always strangely similar, especially the part about the figure. Always a shadow-like shape, usually just watching, sometimes knocking something over before disappearing. From everything I heard, I was the only one who ended up with actual physical marks. So honestly, I don't know what to call it. Maybe that neighborhood was haunted. Maybe it was all coincidence. Maybe it was something none of us understood. But I know what I felt. I know what I saw. And I know those scars are real. I was probably around 9 years old when this happened, and now that I'm almost 42, I can still remember it so clearly. That's what's always stayed with me. It never faded like most childhood memories do. It still feels sharp, like it happened in some strange pocket outside of time. I remember being asleep, and then suddenly I was awake. I don't know what woke me up. I just remember opening my eyes and seeing this figure standing in the dim light near the top of the stairs. From my bed, it was maybe 12 or 14 feet away, standing on that little landing just above the last few steps. And the strangest part is, I wasn't scared. That's what never made sense to me, because as a kid, I was terrified of the dark. I was the kind of child who imagined things in every shadow. But in that moment, I didn't feel fear at all. I felt calm, curious more than anything. I also remember being aware that something about the moment felt wrong or different, like I was in some kind of trance. But even then, I wasn't panicked. I was just trying to understand what I was looking at. It felt like I was being drawn toward it. I slowly pulled the covers down and started getting out of bed, never taking my eyes off this thing. That alone was so unlike me. I would never have done that on my own. But I remember moving carefully, almost peacefully, like I was supposed to follow. Then the figure turned away from me and started walking up the stairs. The next thing I remember, I was already on the landing behind it. It was a few steps ahead of me, maybe 3 or so, and as it climbed, I climbed too, getting a little closer each time. Then it stopped. I stopped too. At that point, I was close enough to really notice it. I started reaching my hand out toward it, almost like I wanted to touch it. And while all of this was happening, I was thinking so clearly. That's another part I've never forgotten. I was fully aware, studying it in this weird state of amazement. It looked human-shaped, but not fully human. Its body was covered in thick fur, kind of like a wolf's, but the color was unusual, a reddish-brown shade, almost like clay or rust. It seemed solid, muscular even, but not huge, not towering, maybe around the size of a grown man. What stood out most were the arms. They seemed longer than normal, not quite proportioned like ours. I kept reaching toward it, wanting to feel the fur, I think. Its back was still to me. Then, just before I could touch it, it started to turn around. And because we were more than halfway up the stairs by then, the light was brighter. I realized I was finally about to see its face. It turned slowly, and right at that exact moment, I heard my mother's voice call out, "Casey, what are you doing?" The second I heard her, I turned toward her voice. That broke whatever hold the moment had on me. I looked right back at the figure, and it was gone. Just gone. And suddenly I was aware of myself again, really aware, and I was standing there on the stairs with both arms stretched out in front of me, reaching for absolutely nothing. My mother rushed over, clearly startled, and put me back to bed. I remember her tucking me in so tightly, wrapping the blankets around me like she was trying to shield me from something she didn't understand. Then the next morning, I woke up to her panicking. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was some kind of lucid dream, maybe sleepwalking, maybe something paranormal. I honestly can't say. But I've carried it with me my whole life, always wondering what that thing was and why I felt no fear at all. More than anything, I remember how aware I was, how deeply conscious I felt in the middle of it, like I somehow knew this was not an ordinary dream. This happened years ago, when I was about 12, maybe 13. I was out with a friend of mine, Mara, and she randomly decided it would be a good idea to go ghost hunting in a graveyard in the middle of the afternoon on a Sunday. I remember thinking it was such a pointless idea, but I went along with it anyway. The only reason I didn't totally hate it was because at least it was daytime. The graveyard was right next to a thick stretch of woods, and I know for a fact I would never have gone anywhere near it after dark. We walked around for a while before we got there, and the first thing that felt strange was how empty it was. Usually on Sundays, there are at least a few people around, visiting graves, cleaning them, leaving flowers, something. But that day, it was quiet. Too quiet. At the time, we brushed it off. We weren't thinking seriously about anything paranormal yet. As we wandered deeper in, we came across a freshly dug burial plot, just sitting there, open and waiting. That really unsettled me. It felt sad, and honestly kind of wrong to be standing there staring at it. After that, we started reading the headstones, looking at the names and dates, and being stupid kids, we started making fun of some of the names. I was the one who started it, and Mara joined in. I still feel bad about that. Then, out of nowhere, I heard my name. Clear as day. Not close by, not whispered, not imagined. Someone called my name from somewhere deeper in the graveyard. We both stopped immediately. No laughing, no talking, nothing. We just stood there, listening, trying to figure out where it had come from. Then we started backing away. And just as we did, it happened again. This time, it didn't sound far away. It sounded like it was coming from all around us at once. The voice had this weird, crackling quality to it, almost like radio static. I can still remember how unnatural it sounded. That was the moment we panicked. We ran. We were just two young girls alone in a cemetery beside the woods, and suddenly every bad idea about being there hit us at once. We ran all the way back toward town, and it felt like forever before we got out of that area. But even after we were back near the streets and houses, I heard my name again. This time, it sounded exactly like my aunt's voice. That's what scared me most, because my aunt wasn't even in the country anymore. She had moved to England months before. Still, I called her later just to check, half hoping there was some normal explanation. She answered, and no, she wasn't back. She hadn't been anywhere near us. So we tried to let it go. I walked Mara home that evening like I normally did. She lived in a house maybe 15 minutes from my apartment. We said goodbye, and I headed home. Everything seemed fine until I got inside and looked at my phone. I had a bunch of missed calls from her, one after another, and a flood of messages asking why I was doing that to her and telling me to stop. I had no idea what she was talking about. I texted back, confused, and then she called me. She was hysterical, crying, yelling, furious. She kept saying I wasn't funny, that I needed to leave her alone, that she never wanted to speak to me again. I got upset too and started yelling back, asking her what on earth she meant, and she showed me someone standing outside her front door. It looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same hair, same height, Same face. Even the voice matched mine. It was pounding on her door and calling for her like I wanted to be let in. I remember just staring at the screen, completely numb. I was at home. I had just walked back. There was no way I could be there. When Mara realized from the call that I truly was in my apartment, we both just froze. Then she hung up and went to get her parents. After that day, things never really felt normal again. I started noticing shadows where there shouldn't be any. Sometimes when I'm walking home alone, I catch sight of figures that look almost human, but not quite. Pale, almost glowing white, a little transparent, gone the second I focus on them. And sometimes, late at night, I hear knocking at my window. I live on the 4th floor. There are no trees tall enough to reach it, no balcony, no reason for anything to be tapping on that glass. I still don't know what happened that day. I don't know if we disturbed something, invited something in, or if something just decided to follow me home. But whatever it was, it knew my name. I want to tell you this carefully, because even now, years later, I still don't fully know what happened to me. For context, I was a heavy IV meth and heroin user from my teens until I was about 31. I'm sober now, coming up on 7 years, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I also can't ignore the fact that a lot of the strangest, darkest experiences of my life happened during those years. So maybe the drugs explain everything. Maybe they don't. I honestly still go back and forth. It started around Christmas of 2015, when my sister gave me this old Ouija board from the 1950s. It looked worn, yellowed with age, the kind of thing that already feels wrong before you even touch it. I used it in my house a few times, mostly out of curiosity, and not long after that, things in the house started to feel off. I'd get this constant sense that I was being watched. Little things would disappear and turn up in weird places. Sometimes I'd hear movement and swear someone else was there when I was completely alone. And more than anything, there was this heavy feeling in the house, like something dark had settled in and was just quietly waiting. That summer, I got really sick. I developed MRSA and sepsis and ended up in the ICU for about a month. Logically, I know exactly why that happened. My drug use put me there. But even in the middle of all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something evil had been following me, like it had attached itself to my life and was just feeding off the chaos. After I got out of the hospital, I managed to stay clean for about a year and a half. During that time, one of my sisters and I rented a house together. For a while, things felt stable. Then one afternoon, she, another sister, and I decided to use the Ouija board again in the backyard. We were trying to reach our mom, who had passed away. That part still hurts to say because I think we really wanted comfort. We wanted it to be her. But the board told us it wasn't our mother. It gave us a different name. Not viscous like before, but something close, viscusa. I still remember how cold I felt reading it. The whole time we were sitting there was a crow perched in this dead tree near the fence, just watching us. It never moved. It was so still it almost didn't seem real. The next morning, around 4 o'clock, I woke up to this violent crashing sound. I jumped out of bed thinking someone had broken in, but when I looked outside, that dead tree had fallen straight through the fence. It landed so close to my bedroom window that if the angle had been slightly different, it could have come right through the wall. After that, the house felt unbearable. My sister and I both started having brutal sleep paralysis. We'd talk about waking up unable to move, sensing something in the room, feeling watched. One morning, I opened my eyes and saw what I thought was my sister on the floor of my bedroom, crawling slowly across the carpet. I remember just freezing, staring, trying to make sense of it. Then I got up to check, and there was nobody there. My sister was still asleep in her room. By early 2018, I had relapsed hard. Everything started falling apart after that. My sister and I stopped living together, and that summer, one of my closest friends came over to my apartment, and we used the board again. The board spelled out, "No H." We took it to mean no heroin. Even then, even as messed up as my life was, that message shook me. The next night, I was at my friend's house with her and another girl. I felt horrible, like my whole body was shutting down, like I was dying. But addiction doesn't care how bad you feel. I still mixed up a huge shot of heroin and meth. And the second I used, something went very, very wrong. My friends told me later that I started speaking in a deep voice that did not sound like mine at all. Not just deeper, different. They said it sounded guttural, harsh, almost inhuman. I would switch back and forth between that voice and my regular one, and when I was using my normal voice, I was begging them to help me. But then it would change again into this language nobody understood. It didn't sound like English. It didn't sound like anything familiar. They said I screamed for hours. Not yelled, screamed. In that voice. Eventually they got so scared, they locked themselves in another room and left me where I was until I finally passed out. The next morning, everything felt wrong. They were distant with me, almost like they were afraid of me, or like I had done something unforgivable. Later that day, I decided to go back to my apartment, and on the way, I got pulled over and arrested for drug possession. Looking back, that whole stretch of my life feels like free fall. By the end of 2018, I ended up in a Christian-based rehab. At first, I hated it. I mean, really hated it. I was angry, resistant, bitter, all of it. But over time, something in me softened. I started opening myself up, at least a little, to the idea of God, and to the possibility that maybe I needed spiritual healing just as much as physical sobriety. Then one night, while I was lying in bed fully awake, I felt a very clear tap on my leg. I turned over, and what I saw is still one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. Standing there was this tall, female-shaped figure with a long, stretched face and these sharp, horrible teeth. It didn't look human. It looked wrong in every possible way. The closest comparison I've ever found is that scene in The Devil's Advocate. That's honestly the nearest thing I can think of. I screamed so loudly I woke up the whole house. I jumped out of bed, ran out of the room sobbing, and I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. The people there had to sit with me for hours before I could calm down. And when I finally went back to bed, I held a cross in my hand the entire night. What stays with me is this. After that night, I never had another experience like that again. Since then, I felt free in a way I never used to. I did spend some time exploring Christianity more deeply, and while my beliefs have evolved, I still believe in God. I also believe there are spiritual things we don't fully understand. And I've stayed sober all these years, which is the biggest blessing of my life. So when I look back on everything, I still wonder what it really was. Were those experiences drug-induced hallucinations? Was it trauma and subconscious fear taking shape in my mind? Or did I really come into contact with something dark, something evil, something that attached itself to me when I kept opening doors I shouldn't have opened? That's my story. I still carry the questions, but I'm just grateful I made it out alive. So this happened in 2023, and honestly, It's one of those things I still can't fully explain. For a bit of background, my grandfather on my dad's side passed away about 20 years earlier when I was really little. My grandparents had lived in a ground floor flat, and my uncle, their youngest son, lived in the flat upstairs. My granddad died in the main bedroom there. By 2023, my Nana had moved into a nursing home because of dementia, and my uncle was still living upstairs. One day, my dad took me over to the flat to collect some of my Nana's jewelry, since she'd always said she wanted me to have it, and he thought it made sense to take it now rather than leave it sitting there. He also said I could look through the spare room and take any old toys or keepsakes I still wanted. Then he and my uncle headed off to visit my Nana, which meant I was left alone in both flats. When you came in through the front door, there was this little hallway. The main bedroom was immediately on the left, and the spare bedroom was across from it on the right. Farther down were the living room and kitchen. I went straight into the spare room first, because I was hoping to find this old vintage toy I used to love, an old transforming burger toy from the late 80s. I started rummaging through boxes and shelves, but I got distracted by all my childhood things. Sitting on my Nana's bookshelf was this music box I remembered so clearly, 2 tiny kittens in a little cart. I picked it up and wound it, just for old time's sake. The second it started playing, I regretted it. The tune had always sounded a little sad to me, and being there alone, surrounded by all those memories, it suddenly hit me so hard. I started feeling like I was doing something wrong, like I was taking things from my Nana when she wasn't there, even though everyone had told me it was okay. She was still alive, but she didn't remember me anymore, and I think that's what made it hurt so much. I just stood there thinking about how badly I wanted things to go back to how they used to be, and I completely broke down. I was crying so hard I could barely see. I tried to keep searching for a little while, but I couldn't focus. After the music box finished, I picked it up and put it carefully back on the shelf. I remember that clearly because I moved it enough that if there had been any little bit of winding left in it, it would have run out then. I'm sure of that. I looked around a bit more, but in the end, I gave up. I never did find the toy. After that, I went across the hall into the main bedroom. There was a huge mirrored wardrobe along one wall, and I stood in front of it for a moment, trying to pull myself together. It wasn't working. I was still crying as I went around the bed toward my Nana's dresser to collect the jewelry. Then, all at once, I stopped. I heard the music box playing again, and I mean, really playing. Not a tiny leftover note or some mechanical click, the full melody. By then, a good amount of time had passed since it had stopped in the other room, and I knew there was no winding left in it. I turned my head and just listened. I stopped crying completely. Then I slowly walked back around the bed and toward the bedroom door, almost expecting the sound to stop or for me to realize I was imagining it. But when I reached the doorway and looked straight into the spare room, I could see the music box sitting there on the shelf, and it was absolutely playing. I just froze. Then I said, out loud, "Granddad, is that you?" The music stopped instantly. Not faded out, not slowed down, it just stopped. I rang my boyfriend first, then my mom, and told them what had happened. Both of them agreed it was really strange. When my dad and uncle came back, I told them too. My dad has never believed in ghosts or anything like that, but even he admitted it was odd. And my uncle said that if anyone in the family would hang around to keep an eye on us, it would probably be my granddad. What makes it even more meaningful to me is that my mom once had an experience too. After my granddad died, she believes she saw him one night before I became seriously ill with pneumonia. She said he told her things were going to get rough, but that I'd be all right. So between what happened to her and what happened to me, I really do believe my granddad is still looking out for me in his own way. And honestly, that brings me a lot of comfort. I live in Minnesota, And over the past couple of years, I've had two experiences that I still can't fully explain. I've replayed them so many times in my head, and even now, they don't feel any less unsettling. The first one happened in late 2024 in a small town near Malacca, at an assisted living home where I was working at the time. One of my coworkers had stepped outside, and this was someone who was usually tough, calm, not the kind of person who got shaken easily. I was in the bathroom when she suddenly came rushing back inside. I could hear her yelling before I even got out, but I couldn't make out what she was saying at first. I just knew from the sound of her voice that something had scared her badly. When I came out, she was panicked, stumbling over her words, repeating herself, saying she'd seen someone by her truck. She kept motioning over her face again and again, trying to explain that the person had on dark clothing, a hood up, and where the face should have been. There was just nothing. No features, no eyes, no mouth, nothing at all. Just this black, empty space. Before I could even process it, she ran to the nearest window and yelled for me to come look. And when I got there, I saw it too. There was a person standing outside, near the lot, wearing a bright pink jacket. At first, they were just staring down at the ground. Then, after a few seconds, they slowly lifted their head toward us. The moment they did, they bolted across the street faster than I would have thought possible and stopped near another building. My coworker ran outside after it, and I followed to the doorway, yelling for her to come back, because I wanted absolutely no part of getting closer to whatever that was. But she kept going, and then quietly told me to come there and look. What I saw next is burned into my memory. The figure in the pink jacket was bent forward in this unnatural way, arms hanging almost to the ground, completely still. And I mean completely still. Not one twitch, not one shift of weight, nothing. Which made no sense, because seconds earlier it had sprinted across the street. But now it looked frozen, like someone had pressed pause on it. Its head was angled toward the ground, and the whole thing felt wrong in a way I can't really put into words. I didn't stay out there. I turned around and went straight back inside. That was enough for me. The second sighting happened on March 1st, 2025, near a cemetery around the Mille Lacs area while I was driving up toward Brainerd for work. This one was shorter, but it hit me just as hard. I was passing by the casino, and for some reason I happened to glance to my left. I never do that there, and honestly, I hadn't even really noticed there was a cemetery across from it before. But that day I looked, and standing at the entrance was a man pacing back and forth. He had on a gray and black hoodie, dark gloves, black pants, dark shoes, hood up. And just like the first one, his face was wrong. Completely blank. No features at all. Just this dark, faceless void where a face should have been. I remember him turning and looking directly at me as I drove by, then just continuing to pace like nothing had happened. I did not turn around. I didn't look back either. I've tried to brush both experiences off, tried to tell myself there had to be some explanation, but I still haven't come up with one that feels right. And honestly, I just want to know whether anyone else around this part of Minnesota has seen anything like that, or anything even remotely similar. Because once you see something like that, it stays with you. So this happened years ago on Halloween night. I know that already makes it sound like the setup to some cliché ghost story, but I swear, that's really when it happened. I was probably around 11, maybe 12. I can't remember my exact age anymore. I was staying in my cousin's neighborhood, hanging around outside with my aunt and a couple of her neighbors while riding my cousin's bike up and down the street. It was getting really late, probably close to midnight. Most of the trick-or-treaters had gone home by then, and my cousin was inside watching scary movies. At some point, I decided to ride farther down the middle of the street, just to get a little space from the adults. My aunt was getting on my nerves for whatever reason, though I honestly can't remember what she was even doing. Since it was so late and the neighborhood was quiet, I wasn't worried about cars. I got maybe 15 or 20 yards away when suddenly, this bright light appeared right in front of me and completely washed out my vision. My first thought was that it had to be a car with its high beams on, so I started turning the bike to head for the curb. But then, the light faded almost as quickly as it had shown up, and when I looked back down the road, there was no car. Instead, I saw this enormous figure standing there. It was maybe 20 yards away from me, and the first thing I noticed was how unbelievably tall it looked. In my memory, it seemed as tall as a utility pole, or at least close to the height of the trees around it. I couldn't make out a face or any real details from that distance, but I remember how thin and unnaturally long it looked. Its skin seemed pale, almost washed out, and there was something strange about it, like it wasn't fully solid. Not invisible exactly, just faint, almost translucent. The closest comparison I can give is that it looked like a bare, stretched-out version of Slender Man. I know that sounds ridiculous, and honestly kind of generic, but that's still the best way I can describe what I saw. The weirdest part is that I wasn't terrified right away. I was mostly just confused. I remember staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Then, after a few seconds, it started moving toward me. It walked slowly, but the way it moved was wrong somehow, stiff and awkward, like its body didn't bend the way it should. Then it made this sudden sharp turn off the road, stepped onto the sidewalk, and disappeared down a narrow walking path that led toward a small creek behind the houses. That path was dark, and within a second or two I lost sight of it completely. That's when I finally felt unsettled. I turned around and rode straight back to my aunt's place. The adults were still outside talking like nothing had happened. I asked if any of them had seen something down the road, and somehow none of them had noticed anything at all. I didn't think they'd believe me, so I changed my story and said I'd just seen a raccoon or something. Then I went inside. The rest of the night was totally normal. Nothing else strange happened. But even now, all these years later, that's still the one experience I've had that I can't explain away. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it was something ordinary that looked wrong in the dark. But honestly, it never felt ordinary. And I still think about it sometimes. I've always been fascinated by sound and the way it can affect both the mind and the body. But for a long time, it was just a curiosity of mine. I didn't know it would one day become something much deeper, something personal. What really changed everything was an experience I had years ago, one that still stays with me. It made me see reality in a completely different way and pushed me toward creating and working with solfeggio frequencies. It happened at my grandmother's house in the Puebla region of Mexico, a place that always felt full of memory, mystery, and presence. My grandmother, who spoke Nahuatl, was known in the family for her prayers, herbal remedies, and quiet spiritual wisdom. One evening, I was alone in her room, a room that still carried her energy so strongly, and I began to hear this low humming sound. It wasn't coming from a speaker or an appliance. It felt like it was coming from the air itself. The sound was steady, deep, almost vibrating through me. Within moments, I felt this intense pressure in my chest, and my body froze. I couldn't move. Everything around me seemed to disappear into that sound until it was the only thing I could hear. Then, as it grew stronger, I saw figures, tall, shadow-like forms moving slowly around the room. They didn't feel aggressive, but they were unmistakably there. I remember being terrified, but at the same time, I felt like I was witnessing something beyond ordinary explanation. In that moment, I thought of my grandmother, Elena, and the things she used to say about protecting your energy. She believed that certain sounds, prayers, and vibrations could shift what we allow into our space. She would always say that sound had power, not just to heal, but also to influence what we cannot see. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I started researching sound, vibration, and spiritual traditions, and that's when I discovered solfeggio frequencies. These ancient tones associated with sacred music, healing practices, and inner transformation. I became obsessed with learning more. I started experimenting with tone generators, synths, and different sound layers, trying to recreate frequencies that felt meaningful to me. What surprised me most was what I felt when I began listening to them regularly. I started having experiences that reminded me of that night in my grandmother's room. But this time, instead of fear, I felt calm. Deep calm. Peace, clarity, and this strange but beautiful sense of connection, like I was touching something just beyond the surface of everyday life. That's what led me to bring these frequencies into my meditation and healing work. I started to understand sound as more than just something we hear. To me, it became a doorway, a way of entering altered states of awareness and connecting with something greater than ourselves. And honestly, I still wonder about it all. Are sound vibrations part of a bigger mystery we still don't fully understand? Maybe. Science hasn't explained everything, but ancient cultures seem to know that sound could shift perception, energy, and even reality itself. The more I explore it, the more convinced I become that sound is one of the most powerful tools we have. Today, these frequencies are part of both my life and my creative path. Whether I'm using them for meditation, healing, or spiritual protection, I truly believe their potential is limitless. Hello to all the amazing viewers of the Paranormal M channel. You have no idea how much I love what I do. Reading your comments, hearing your paranormal stories from around the world, and helping you sleep a little better. It honestly means everything to me. Thank you for sharing so many experiences with us, and please, keep them coming. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. Now, let's dive into today's paranormal stories. So, hey, thanks for listening. I've been sitting with this for a while, and I honestly don't know what to make of it. I manage this really old community hall in my town, the kind of place with scuffed wooden floors, dusty trophy cases, and that faint smell of old curtains that never truly goes away. My boss is my aunt, Mara, and she's worked with the building forever. She swears up and down there's never been anything creepy going on there. No stories, no haunted hall reputation, nothing. And for a while, I believed her. But a little over a year after I started, small things began happening upstairs in the lounge area. The biggest one, the one that keeps repeating like it's got a routine, is the TV turning on by itself. And this isn't some sleek little flat screen. It's one of those massive, ancient Panasonic projection TVs with a chunky speaker base built into the bottom. Heavy, loud, stubborn. It sits right near the entrance to the upstairs lounge, like it's stationed there. At first, it would flip on when I was leaving, and I wouldn't notice until later. Then I'd get a text like, "Did you seriously leave the TV on again?" And I'd have to apologize, even though I truly didn't remember touching it. After a while, it started feeling intentional. Like it would wait. Then it would turn on the second I stepped into the lounge, or right as I crossed the threshold to leave, the exact moment I'd be forced to see it. Not when other staff were around, not during busy events, just me. And the weird part? it never happens to anyone else. I asked around. I asked maintenance. I asked the weekend crew. Nothing. Mara's been involved with that hall for decades and says she's never had the TV do anything like that. I tried to convince myself it was a wiring glitch or a dying power button, and maybe it was. I really wanted it to be. But then something happened earlier this year that kind of cracked that explanation clean in half. Upstairs, my office sits beside a short little hallway that leads to the bathrooms. It's not even long, just a few steps, but it's always darker than it should be, like the light doesn't fully reach it. That hallway is the only place in the whole building that makes my stomach tighten for no logical reason. I've had weird experiences before in my life, enough that I learned a rule I've tried to live by. If you don't feed it attention, it usually doesn't push. So I keep my head down. I don't talk into the dark. I don't challenge anything. I do my job, lock up, go home. Most nights, that works. But one evening, I was locking my office door and I felt it. That awful sensation that someone is staring at you. Not a casual glance, not imagined. Like an intense, fixed stare from the bathroom hallway. It was so strong, I actually froze with my keys in my hand. Now, I have this EVP-style app on my phone, one of those ghost communication things. I'll be honest, I don't take it seriously. I mostly downloaded it out of curiosity, and sometimes I used it in the hall just to map out where the wiring hotspots are, because the building's old and the electricity does strange things. I wanted to know what a normal reading looked like in different spots. My office entry area usually reads low, almost nothing. That night, I opened the app anyway, more out of nervous habit than belief. The meter jumped immediately into the middle range, and then it generated 2 words, "Come closer." My skin went cold, my chest tightened. Every instinct I have said, no, get out, now. So I ran. Not a calm, let's leave run. I bolted. I flew out of the upstairs doors and down the stairs, still doing that frantic thing where you're trying to be responsible while you're terrified. Locking side rooms as you pass them, slapping switches, moving too fast and dropping your keys once, catching them, almost tripping. I set the alarm, locked the main doors, and drove home like the rear-view mirror was going to show something sitting in my back seat. And then, when I got home, my phone rang. It was Mara. She sounded tense, annoyed, confused, all at once. She asked, "Did you lock up properly? Because the alarm just tripped." I told her yes, absolutely yes. I was sure. I checked everything like 3 times because I was already rattled. She said the sensors were triggered in a path, starting at the front entrance, then up the stairs, then into the upstairs lounge. Like something had come in after I left, and walked right back up to where I'd been. She insisted I go back and check. I didn't want to. I felt sick even thinking about it. But I did. And when I got there, everything was exactly how I'd left it. Every lock, every door, secure. So the only explanation that made sense to my brain in that moment, as much as I hated it, was this. Whatever I felt upstairs followed me as I ran out. It waited until I was gone. And then it moved back through the building and triggered the alarms on its way upstairs. That's the part I can't shake. Because usually, the weird stuff is subtle, annoying, like the old TV turning on. But after that night, after I'd opened the door to communicating, even in the smallest way, it felt like the presence got stronger, like it realized I could notice it. Since then, I've gone back to ignoring it. I don't use the app anymore. I don't react to the TV. I don't talk about it in the building. But I still get the sense sometimes that it's trying to pull my attention back, like it's waiting for me to slip and acknowledge it again. and I don't know why. People always say, maybe it wants to tell you something. But what I felt wasn't curious or sad. It wasn't gentle. It felt wrong. It felt like something that wanted me closer for a reason that wasn't good for me. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Have you ever had something like this happen? Something that only seems to happen to one person? And if you have, what did you do? Because I'm not trying to be brave here. I'm just trying to do my job and not invite something dangerous into my life. Hey, so this is one of those things I still struggle to talk about, because the second you say paranormal, people either get quiet or they get that look like you're making it up. And I'm not trying to convince anybody or win an argument. I'm just telling you what happened to me, the way I remember it. And honestly, I'm hoping someone out there will hear it and go, yeah, me too. The first time anything like this happened, I was really little. Preschool little. We were in this cramped apartment, and my older brother, Tyler, and I shared a room. He had the top bunk, and we were doing what kids do, wrestling, shoving, laughing too loud. At some point, he swung a foot, and I went right off the bed. And I should have hit the floor hard, but I didn't. It's hard to put into words without sounding ridiculous, but it felt like I got caught, like the air itself held me for a second. Like something grabbed me mid-fall and paused me just long enough that I didn't get hurt. I remember this weird, weightless feeling, like I floated for a beat before landing softer than I should have. I was probably 5. Maybe it was 94 or 95. I just know I was tiny, and I remember looking up after, confused, like, what was that? The second incident is the one that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. We'd moved into a house with my grandparents. More space, but somehow heavier, if that makes sense. My parents had added this extra room off the back. It used to be an old patio, and they built over it. There was a futon back there, a box fan, a little TV. So of course Tyler and I claimed it as our hangout room. We dragged in blankets, pillows, toys, made a whole messy kid nest out of it. One afternoon, Tyler suddenly froze and got that scared, tight look on his face. He whispered, "There's something in the blankets." And I remember rolling my eyes because he could be dramatic. I was like, stop lying. He wouldn't move. He just pointed. And where he pointed, the blankets looked wrong. Like the fabric dipped way deeper than it should. Like a pocket that didn't belong there. Almost like a dark little hollow formed inside the pile. I can still picture it. Not a normal shadow. More like the blankets swallowed the light. And because I was a stubborn little brat, I scooted closer, lifted my foot, and stomped right into it. Hard. Like, see? Nothing. The moment my foot hit, something wrapped around my ankle. Instantly. Not like fabric catching, not like a loose cord. It felt like a grip. Firm, deliberate. Like something alive closing around me. I yanked back and couldn't. Tyler screamed. I screamed. It was chaos. My mom came storming in, exhausted and furious, like, "What is wrong with you two?" She shoved the futon, tore through the blankets, flung pillows everywhere. Nothing. No animal. No object. No explanation. After that, we didn't play in that room again. Not because we were told not to. We just couldn't. I was maybe 8. Tyler maybe 9. Late 90s, give or take. Then there was the bathroom incident. This was still that same house. My mom was working long hospital shifts at the time, and my grandma traveled for work a lot. So some nights it was just my grandpa, my brother, my dad, and me. Their rooms were all down the hall, and mine was near the bathroom. One night I got up to pee. The house was quiet in that way houses get when everyone is asleep, like the walls are holding their breath. I'm in there, half asleep, and right as I'm about to flush, I hear a knock on the bathroom door. I go, "Hello? I'm in here." And right away, a woman's voice answers, clear as day. It sounded like my mom, with that impatient but not angry tone. And I remember laughing because it sounded so normal. Like, really, Mom? I can't have 2 minutes? I washed my hands, still smirking, and then it hit me like ice water. My mom wasn't home. My grandma wasn't home either. And the house, suddenly, felt too big, too dark, too silent. I didn't want to open the door. My heart was pounding. I stood there for what felt like forever, and finally, I cracked it open. Pitch black hallway. No lights, no movement, nobody awake, no one at the end of the hall, nothing. I bolted back to my room and slammed my door like something was chasing me. I didn't have a lock, so I turned on the light and sat with my back against the door, knees pulled up, shaking. I was about 11, early 2000s, and even now, decades later, I still have nightmares where I'm leaving a bathroom into a dark hallway, and I swear my body remembers the fear before my brain can even catch up. A few years after that, things got weird in a different way. My grandpa woke up one night convinced he saw someone moving through the hall, like a person walking past the doorway. He told my grandma, "Didn't you just see them?" And she was like, "See who? There's nobody." And he just shrugged, dead serious, and goes, "Must have been a ghost." My grandma didn't sleep after that. She stayed up, scared and wide awake, like she didn't trust the house anymore. Then about a week later, my best friend, Jules, was over. We were teenagers by then. She walked down the hall and did that double-take thing toward my grandparents' room. Not screaming, not dramatic, just a quiet, confused look. Later, I walked down the hall too, and as I was walking back, I glanced into my grandpa's TV room, and I saw what looked like someone standing there. A tall, dark shape. Not detailed, just a presence. I stopped. My skin prickled, and Jules immediately goes, softly, "You saw it too, didn't you?" I said, "Saw what?" She said, "That black figure in your grandpa's room." And I swear my blood went cold, because I hadn't told her what I'd seen yet. We both tried to laugh it off. Teenagers do that, you know. But the truth is, neither of us forgot it. Fast forward to adulthood. I went through a breakup, messy, painful, and around that same time my mom had a serious accident. She survived, thank God, but it shook everything up. We ended up moving to a different town and into a rental house that had apparently been empty for a couple of years. I moved in first because I lived nearby. The first nights alone, I kept hearing little things, like the house settling, except it didn't feel like settling. It felt like someone else was there. I'd get up, check rooms, nothing. Then I'd climb back into bed. One night, I woke up because I felt something tug my foot. I snapped awake, yanked my leg under the covers, heart racing, telling myself it was a dream. Then later, maybe minutes, maybe longer, something grabbed my leg and yanked me. Not a gentle pull, a hard, violent yank. It dragged me out of bed by my ankle and pulled me toward the doorway. I'm not exaggerating. I hit the floor and slid. I screamed and kicked and finally broke free, scrambled back, turned on every light in the room, and stayed awake until morning. That was the first night I felt truly unsafe in my own bed. After that, the house changed my sleep. I started having night terrors, deep, brutal ones. I'd wake up hearing screaming, but no one else heard it. I'd see dark shapes moving through rooms. Once, my mom admitted she'd seen something too, which almost made it worse, because I couldn't tell myself it was only me anymore. But even he started having moments. Misplaced items he swore he'd just set down. Footsteps that didn't match anyone's. That feeling like you're being watched when you're alone in a room. He'd always end it with, It's just stress. Like saying it out loud could pin it down and make it harmless. The last big incident in that house was around 2020. He was playing video games and I was on the bed beside him. In my mind, I was awake. I could hear the game, see the screen, hear him breathing. Everything felt real. And then I noticed something at the window. A shape. A man-like silhouette. Wrong in that way shadows are wrong when they want to be seen. And it started trying to get in. I know how that sounds. I do. But in that moment, it wasn't a thought. It was a fact. Like my body understood danger before my brain could argue. I started screaming, swinging, kicking, trying to get away. My husband whipped around shouting, "What? What is it?" And I was yelling, "He's at the window. He's coming in. He's getting in." My husband ran to the window, flipping out, because to him it sounded like there was an actual man outside. He didn't see anything. He swears I was asleep. I swear I wasn't. But after that night, something got worse. The nightmares came harder. The air in that house felt heavy, mean, like living inside a bad mood you couldn't shake. I sank into the darkest depression I've ever had. I felt drained, like I was carrying dread in my bones. And then, this part matters. We moved. End of 2022, we bought our own place. We left a ton behind on purpose. Old stuff, junk, anything tied to ugly memories. Anything that felt contaminated with bad years. And my brother, Tyler, was no longer part of our day-to-day life. He'd become a really negative person, and eventually he ended up locked up. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it ties into what he told us later. From the very first night in the new house, the night terrors stopped. Like someone flipped a switch. No more screaming in my sleep. No more dark figures. No more feeling watched. The air felt clean, peaceful, safe. I had one strange dream where someone was searching for me, and in the dream I was back in my childhood house, like my mind still had a string tied to it. But even that felt distant compared to what I used to live with. And then I found out my grandma was finally selling that old house, and I felt relief. Not sadness, relief. Because that place didn't hold warmth for me. It held tension. It held fear. It held too many nights where something felt off. Here's the part that still makes me uncomfortable. Before my brother disappeared from our lives, he admitted he'd done ritual-type stuff in his room when we were younger. Like he invited things in. I don't even know what to believe about that. Part of me wants to roll my eyes. Part of me remembers everything that happened and can't fully dismiss it. And when he got arrested years later, people said they found disturbing occult stuff in his apartment. Symbols, candles, things laid out like some kind of intention. I don't know if it was real, satanic anything, or if it was him being edgy and sick and trying to scare people. Either way, it makes my skin crawl. So, that's it. That's the story. I'm not asking anyone to worship the paranormal or agree with me. I'm honestly open to logical explanations. Sleep disorders, trauma responses, stress, the way a bad environment can poison your nervous system. Maybe my husband is right and it was stress the whole time. And if you've ever had anything like this, anything you can't easily explain, I'd genuinely like to hear it. Or if you have a grounded explanation that isn't cruel, I'm open to that too. I'm not looking for people to mock me. I'm just looking for perspective. And maybe proof that I'm not the only one who's walked out of a bathroom into a dark hallway and felt the world tilt the wrong way. So this happened about 6 years ago, back when I was still in school, and my bedroom was set up in what used to be our garage. My older cousin, let's call her Maris, was staying with my family for a couple of weeks. And the whole time she was there, we kept having these little ghost moments that were easy to brush off. Like, you'd hear a sharp knock on the wall, and we'd be like, yeah, okay, the house is settling, even if it didn't sound like that at all. Or we'd hear a weird scrape in the hallway and decide it was probably the cat, even when the cat was literally asleep on the bed. Once, I could have sworn I saw a woman's face in the bathroom mirror, just for a split second, but I convinced myself it was just a shadow and bad lighting and me being dramatic. Nothing ever felt serious. Until the last night Maris was there. We had school in the morning, so we went to bed earlier than usual. I remember being extra tired, that heavy kind of tired where you fall asleep before your head even sinks into the pillow. And then, somewhere in the middle of the night, I got shaken awake. Not gently either, like urgent. I rolled over, irritated and half asleep, ready to snap at Maris for messing with me. But she was still lying beside me, stiff as a board. And I remember reaching out and grabbing her arm like, "Are you kidding me right now?" No words. None. Just that awful silence. But then she looked past me, past my shoulder, and her face changed so fast it made my stomach drop. Like all the color drained out of her. Her eyes were wide, frozen, and I could see she was trying to breathe quietly, like making noise would make it worse. And before I even turned, I started tearing up, like my body already knew what I was about to see. The room was almost completely dark, except for a thin stripe of moonlight coming through the window. And because the room used to be a garage, the ceiling felt higher than a normal bedroom. Everything in there felt a little too open, a little too empty at night. I turned toward the corner of the room, and there were eyes. Not a face, not a shape I could really make out, just eyes. Way too high up, like impossibly high, 7 or 8 feet from the floor, higher than where a person's head should ever be. They weren't glowing like in movies. It was worse than that. I just remember the pale whites catching that tiny bit of moonlight, like they were watching without blinking. I started crying instantly, quiet crying, the kind where you're trying not to make a sound because you're scared it'll notice. And Maris finally whispered, barely audible, "What is that?" That's the only thing I clearly remember her saying. And this is the part that still makes me feel weird about myself. Because instead of running or screaming or doing anything that makes sense, I laid back down. Still crying, still terrified. I just turned away and pulled the blanket up and, like my body hit an off switch, I fell asleep. Like I shut down. The next morning, we got up for school and it was heavy. We looked at each other and I knew she remembered. She knew I remembered. But we didn't talk about it right away. We just moved around the house like normal people pretending nothing happened. Then, in the kitchen, right as we were about to leave, I said, trying to make it sound casual, like I wasn't about to lose it, "I had a really weird dream last night." That's when we finally talked about it. We compared what we saw, what we felt, what we remembered, and everything matched, except for one thing. To this day, Maris swears I woke her up. She insists she never shook me awake at all. But I swear it was her. We kind of laughed it off, because what else do you do with something like that? You don't want to sound crazy. You don't want to be the person who's dead serious about eyes in the corner at breakfast before algebra. But even now, years later, I still get anxious about that corner before I go to sleep. And lately, this is why I've been thinking about it again. My dog has started whining at night. Not every night, but often enough that it sticks with me. He'll stand there, tense, staring at that same corner, letting out these soft, upset little cries, like he wants to leave the room, but doesn't want to turn his back on whatever he thinks is there. And I always tell people I don't believe in ghosts. I still say that. But I also say, I've got a few stories I can't explain. And this is the one that never really left me, because it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like something was there, just out of reach of the light. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you the way it happened, because even now, I'm not totally sure what to make of it. A few nights ago, 3, I think, I was riding with my Aunt Marisol on this quiet back road that cuts through a ton of trees. We weren't even going anywhere exciting, just heading home after visiting family. It was already getting late, like a little after sunset, and the sky had that deep blue look where everything feels slightly unreal. Then the car started acting weird. First a warning light, then this sharp beep, and suddenly the temperature gauge shot up like it was panicking. Marisol pulled into this small church parking lot that looked like it hadn't been busy in years. No other cars, no streetlights, just this wide stretch of cracked pavement and one side of it completely hugged by dense woods. Pines and underbrush packed together so tight it looked like a wall. We turned the car off because it smelled hot, like overheated metal. A minute later, she tried to start it again, and it wouldn't even cough. Nothing. So she called my Uncle Dwayne to come meet us, and while we were waiting, I got out just to breathe and stretch. And that's when I really noticed the woods. You know how sometimes trees don't just look like trees? Sometimes they look like a place you shouldn't stare into for too long? That's what it felt like. It was quiet in this heavy, pressing way, like the sound got swallowed the closer you looked. I took my phone out and snapped a picture to send my friend Tessa, mostly to be like, hey, this is creepy, right? And when I looked at the photo, my stomach did this slow drop. Because on the screen, only on the screen, there was this pale, milky glow tucked between the trees. Not a flashlight beam, not eye shine, not anything I could explain. Just this soft, white shape, like fog lit from inside. And it wasn't there when I looked with my actual eyes. So, of course, I did the thing everyone would do. I aimed my phone at different parts of the woods to see if it was some weird lens flare. But nothing else lit up. Only that one spot. And there weren't any lamps or headlights or reflective signs around us that could have caused it. Just trees. Just dark. My uncle got there, and after a lot of messing around under the hood, we ended up getting the car towed. We made it home, and I remember walking into my room and feeling this sudden wrongness. Like the air wasn't hostile exactly, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I told myself it was just stress, just adrenaline, and I went to bed. The next morning is when things started lining up in my head in a way I didn't like. I woke up to knocking on my window. Not scratching, not tapping, knocking. 3 steady knocks like someone trying to get your attention politely. Then it sped up, rat-a-tat, fast and impatient. Then it stopped for a beat and started again from the beginning. 3 knocks, rapid knocks, repeat. And the creepiest part? It didn't stay in one place. It moved, like it was traveling along the window frame, then up higher, then to the other pane. I sat there in bed, frozen, trying to convince myself it was a bird or a branch. But when I finally worked up the nerve to go outside and look, there was nothing. No trees close enough, no loose shutters, no anything. And my window sits higher than most animals could reach without climbing, and the sound was so clean, so deliberate, like knuckles on glass. That night I tried to act normal. I did homework, I scrolled, I even laughed at a couple dumb videos like I could trick my body into calming down. But then, while I was at my vanity, a small bottle, one that was nowhere near the edge, just tipped and slid like it got flicked. A minute later, something on my desk shifted and dropped, and there was no reason for it. No breeze, no fan pointed that way. Nothing vibrating or shaking the furniture. I tried staying awake, because sleeping suddenly felt like leaving the door unlocked. I dozed off a couple times without meaning to, and the last time, it couldn't have been longer than 10 minutes. But in that tiny sliver of sleep, I heard this sound, this horrible, tearing screech. Not like an animal, not like a person either. It was thin and sharp and full of anger, like something trying to force its way into the world. I sat straight up with my heart punching my ribs, and the room was still, silent, like it had never happened. Today was worse in a quieter way. All day I kept feeling these little touches, like a brush along my elbow or a cold press at my upper arm. Each time I'd whip my head around like, "What was that?" and there'd be nothing. At school I blamed it on nerves, on people passing in crowded halls, on my backpack strap, on anything. But it followed me home. And then, just a bit ago, I walked out of the bathroom into the hallway, and I felt a cold hand, cold like it had been outside in winter, rest on my shoulder from behind. It wasn't a graze. It wasn't air. It was a firm touch, like someone trying to stop me. I actually turned around and said, "Hey," because my first thought was that my uncle was behind me messing around, being annoying. Nobody was there. I let out this little yelp, half scream, half gasp, and I turned back toward my room, and, I swear to you, I saw a shadow move down the hall toward my mom's room. It wasn't a normal shadow. It had direction, purpose, like it was going somewhere. And the thing is, my uncle's room is right behind that hallway. If he'd walked past me, I would have seen him. I would have heard him. There's no way he could have slipped by without me noticing. So now I'm sitting here telling you this, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to be reasonable, and my brain keeps circling back to that church parking lot, that wall of trees, that glow that only existed through my camera, and this awful feeling that whatever noticed me out there didn't stay out there. So, I want to tell you about the house I grew up in. My family lived there for about 16 years, and for most of that time, weird stuff was just part of the background. Not like every single day, but often enough that you'd stop arguing with yourself about it. When I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, my mom would sometimes leave me and my sister Maya home for a couple hours while she finished work. And more than once, we'd be in the kitchen and the cupboard doors would start opening and closing on their own. Not a gentle creak either, like someone was deliberately doing it. Sometimes one door, then another, like it was moving down the line. One time it got so intense, I actually picked up the phone and called my mom at work because I didn't know what else to do. There's one moment I can still picture so clearly. This heavy marble paper towel stand, like a chunk of stone, the kind that feels cold even in summer, shifted, lifted a little, and then slammed down on the counter. And I need you to understand, that thing was so heavy we couldn't even lift it properly at that age. Not together, not without struggling, but it moved like it had hands. And then there's the missing things thing. Not the normal, "where'd my socks go" kind of missing. I mean, something will be in your hand, you'll turn for a second, and it's just gone. You tear the room apart, shake out blankets, check under pillows, get frustrated, leave the room to look somewhere else, and when you come back, it's sitting right there, on top of the bed, like it's been placed there to prove a point. Over Christmas holidays, when my cousins would come stay, the house felt even busier, louder, warmer, more crowded. But that's when I saw something that still makes my stomach flip. I was in my room and I saw what I swore was Maya, my little sister, run up the stairs and dart into the closet in the next room over. I called out like, "Maya?" and went to grab her, expecting a giggle or a "what?" And the room was empty. The closet was empty. No one. Nothing. My grandma lived in the basement for a while too, and she had her own stories. She'd wake up thinking one of my little sisters was beside her bed, like trying to get her attention. Little footsteps, a shape, that feeling of someone right there. She'd speak, half asleep, and then realize the room was still and empty. And it wasn't just us. Friends would come over and casually say things like, "Do you feel weird in here?" Like they didn't even want to admit they were asking. Different people, different times. For some, it was my old bedroom. For others, it was the living room at night. And the basement. The basement was almost always the place people mentioned. Like the air down there had weight. But the most vivid, the one that sits in my chest even now, was in the middle of a normal afternoon. Bright outside. Not spooky hours. My sister and I were watching TV in my mom's room while she showered. Everything felt ordinary. And then we heard it. This laugh. It came from the closet. Not a little noise you could explain away. A real laugh. Clear enough that both of us snapped our heads toward the closet at the exact same time. We looked at each other, wide-eyed, like we'd both just been slapped by the same invisible hand, and we ran out of the room so fast I swear my feet barely touched the floor. My mom later told us we were imagining it, that our minds were playing tricks. But here's the thing. I know what it sounds like when you scare yourself. That wasn't it. That was something else. And it wanted us to know it was there. But then, life happened. Real life. Hard life. There were years where the house wasn't just a house. It held alcoholism. It held yelling and fear. It held things breaking, sometimes objects, sometimes people. I went through a long stretch of depression that felt bottomless, and there were times I genuinely didn't know if I'd make it through my own thoughts. And after all of that, the energy changed. It stopped feeling like a weird presence you could shrug at, and started feeling like something sour moved in and settled deep. You could feel it in your body. If you stand in the hallway with the living room lights off, there's this sinking feeling, like the dark is heavier there than it should be. And the basement? The basement feels like a dare. My mom has told me she's seen something in the corner of her room while she's sleeping, like a shape watching. She doesn't say it dramatically either. She says it in that careful, controlled way people talk when they're trying not to sound insane. And I believe her. I believe her so much that even talking to you about it right now has my heart going a little too fast. The reason I'm even telling you all this is because something happened recently that scared me in a different way. I don't live there anymore, but my mom and my two younger sisters, Leah and Sophie, still do. They're teenagers now. And the other day, my mom was home alone, doing laundry in the basement in the middle of the day. Normal, mundane. And then something touched her back. Not a breeze, not a brush of fabric. She said it felt like pressure, like a hand or a palm hot against her skin. And she panicked. She ran upstairs and out of the house, like her body decided before her brain did. And that's what's been sticking with me. Because this feels like escalation. Like it waited until she was alone. Like it knew she'd be distracted. Like it chose a moment where she wouldn't be expecting anything. We've always had this attitude of, don't feed it fear. Like, tell it to leave. Be firm. Don't beg. Don't act small. And honestly, that approach seemed to work most of the time. At least enough that we could live our lives. But this is the first time it feels physical, and it scares me in a way the cupboards and missing objects never did. I told my mom she should get someone experienced to come by, someone who knows what they're doing, not just someone who wants to play ghost hunter, someone who can walk through the house and read what's there without stirring it up. Because I don't want my mom down there alone again, wondering if something is going to put a hand on her back when her guard is down. And if I'm being totally honest with you, what scares me most isn't the idea of a ghost. It's the feeling that the house listened to us for years, like it learned our routines, and now it's testing what it can do. So, this is one of those things where, if I hadn't lived it, I'd probably roll my eyes a little. About a month ago, my wife, Mara, and I started having these insanely vivid dreams, like every single night. Mara's always been the dreamer between us. She gets night terrors sometimes, so vivid sleep stuff isn't exactly new for her. But me? I'm usually the guy who wakes up and goes, "I slept," and that's the whole story. Except suddenly I'm remembering everything. Whole scenes, whole feelings. Like my brain is filming movies and forcing me to watch the replays. Most of them were just annoying dream weird. Like one night I'm pedaling a bike down this steep hill chasing somebody, and no matter how hard I push, it's like I'm stuck in slow motion and they're gliding away effortlessly. Another night I'm trying to wipe fingerprints off the windows in our house, and every time I set the spray bottle down, gone. Paper towels, gone. And I keep marching back to the same cabinet under the sink like a fool, getting more and more furious, like I'm being pranked by an invisible toddler. But then a few of the dreams shifted into this darker lane. There was one where I noticed smoke curling out of our bathroom. I ran to grab the fire extinguisher, and by the time I got back, the whole room was just engulfed. Like fire climbing the walls, roaring, heat in my face. And I'm standing there thinking, why isn't the smoke alarm going off? It's the weirdest detail, but it's what stuck with me. This quiet, dead silence while everything burns. The next morning I'm telling Mara about it, half laughing at myself for dream panicking. And right in the middle of me talking, the smoke detector starts chirping. Low battery beep. Just that little, "Hey, you need to replace me" sound. Not supernatural, I know that. But it hit me like someone timed it on purpose. Like my dream was tapping the glass. Then there was another one that messed me up more than I want to admit. I woke up in the dream, and there was this dark shape standing in the corner of our bedroom. Not moving, just there, watching. And the worst part is it didn't feel like a quick nightmare. It felt like it lasted all night. Me lying there pretending to be asleep because in the dream, I was convinced if it knew I was awake, something would happen. When my real alarm finally went off, I woke up sweating, and I couldn't shake that feeling all day. Like every hallway in my house had an extra set of eyes. But the thing that really turned my stomach happened a few mornings after that. I had this dream 3 times in the same night. Same exact sequence. Someone is standing next to the bed, and they press a hand down hard against the side of my face, like a palm pushing into my cheekbone. Every time it happened, it scared me so badly I snapped awake. And here's the part I can't explain. When I woke up, I could still feel the pressure. Not like, oh, I imagined it. Like my skin still remembered it. The 3rd time I jolted awake, the room looked brighter. Morning light. And I realized our son, Eli, he's 3, was in bed with me. Mara's usually up early, so her side was empty like normal. Eli was lying in her spot, wide awake, staring at me with this confused little frown, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. And before I can even say anything, he goes, in this calm little voice, "Whose hand was that?" Instant goosebumps, like my whole body tightened. I laughed, because what else do you do when your kid says something like that? And I went, "What do you mean, buddy?" I swear my stomach dropped. I asked him, "What hand?" And he points right at my face, right where I'd been feeling it in the dream, and he goes, "It was there." I'm panicking on the inside, but I do that parent thing where you force your voice to stay light, like you're narrating a cartoon. I'm like, huh? I don't know what you mean. Look, these are my hands. And I whip my hands out from under the blanket and do this goofy face like I'm trying out for a children's show. And that's all it took. He smiles like, oh, okay. And he leans in and asks for a hug. I hugged him, obviously. But inside I was thinking, did you just see something I didn't? Or did I bring something into the room with my own stupid dream? I didn't bring it up again after that. Not to him. I didn't want to plant anything in his head. And then last night, because apparently we're just collecting these moments now, Eli decides to casually ruin my evening. We're sitting on the living room floor playing with toys, and out of nowhere he goes, "Who is the black spiky man?" I'm like, "The what?" And he says it again, totally matter of fact. "The black spiky man." I asked him, "What man?" And he points toward the kitchen and goes, "In there." I tried to keep my voice normal, but I could feel my skin prickling. So I do the logical parent thing and go, "Oh, maybe you saw a shadow. Can you show me?" And Eli nods like this is the most reasonable request in the world. He takes my hand and walks me into the kitchen like he's giving a tour. He looks around for a few seconds, slowly, like he's scanning, and then he goes, "He's not here." And I'm like, "Oh, good. Okay. Must have been your imagination." And I just dropped it. Because what else am I supposed to say? Cool. Tell the shadow man I said hi. So now I'm sitting here trying to file all of this into a nice, neat box labeled coincidence. Maybe it's just stress. Work's been heavier lately, and when I'm stressed, my sleep is trash. Maybe that explains the dreams. Maybe the smoke alarm beep was just a smoke alarm doing smoke alarm things. Maybe the hand moment was my brain blending dream stuff with waking up and noticing my kid next to me. Maybe the black spiky man is just a 3-year-old being a 3-year-old because kids say unsettling things like it's a hobby. But here's the detail that started bothering me once I replayed the timeline. Right around when all this began, we went to a family christening, Mara's side of the family. After the service, there was this little get-together, and at the end, they handed out party favors. Small gift bags with sweets and a little keepsake. In ours, there were these sugared almonds, which, gross, we tossed them the minute we got home. And these tiny prayer beads. Not expensive or anything, just a simple little set. And for some reason, Mara and I both took them out and hung them from the lamps on our bedside tables. Like a little decoration. Like, "Aw, that's nice." I can't swear on my life that the first night of the dreams was exactly the night we hung them up. But it was close. Close enough that my brain keeps circling it like a dog sniffing something strange. And maybe it's nothing. Truly. Maybe it's all just timing and stress and a kid with a spooky imagination. It gets hard to laugh it off. It just does. So, this has had my brain doing somersaults for the past few days, and I've got to tell someone who will actually listen. So, hey, thanks for being here. It started when I was 19, back when I was training like my life depended on it, because I was dead set on enlisting. I lived out in northeast Tennessee, and I had this same running route I did constantly. This long, straight stretch of road with wide open fields on both sides, a couple scattered barns, and barely any houses. It was the kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing and the little gravel crunch under your shoes. Most days I ran early, like 6 or 7 a.m., but one day I'd planned to take a rest, and I don't know how to explain it other than I had this weird, stubborn pull all day long. Not hype, not discipline, more like something was tugging on me. Like, no, you need to go. So finally, later than usual, closer to 4 p.m., I gave in. I lace up, head out, and I'm a couple miles in, zoning out in that runner's tunnel vision. I look down at my phone to switch the song, and I swear to you, it's like a person just appeared in the exact spot my body was headed. I slam right into him. He goes down hard, and I'm instantly panicking, like, oh my God, I just destroyed an old man on the side of a rural road. I drop down, grab his arm, and help him up as fast as I can. I go, "Man, my bad, sir. I didn't even see anybody out here." He brushes dirt off himself and goes, "You're fine." But then he looks at me, and I mean really looks at me. His face, it changes in a way I still can't shake, like he's gone pale, like the air got sucked out of him. His eyes widen, and his mouth just kind of hangs open, and he looks at me the way someone looks at a nightmare they can't wake up from. I've seen people get startled. I've seen people get scared. This was different. This was pure, cold, gut-level fear. Then he sticks his hand out toward me, almost like he's reaching for proof that I'm real. I didn't know what to do with that. I kind of stepped back, awkward, and said something like, "Take care. Sorry again." And he just stood there staring as I jogged off, confused as hell, checking over my shoulder like maybe he was going to say something. But he didn't. I finished my run and tried to forget it, except I never really did. Now here's where it gets unreal. Fast forward about 9 years. I'm in the army now, been in for a while. I'm stationed closer to home than I used to be. I've put on a lot more muscle, and because of a religious exemption, I've got this full beard I keep groomed. I'm not the skinny kid I was. I'm a sergeant now, older, steadier, the kind of tired you can't fix with sleep. Holiday leave comes around, and I get this strong feeling that I need to go home. Not just, it'd be nice. More like that same tug from years ago. Quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. So I fly into East Tennessee and stay at a hotel. A couple days pass, and one afternoon the weather is perfect. Early fall, that crisp air that smells like leaves and distant wood smoke. Nostalgia hits me hard. I keep thinking about the old place I lived near as a kid, and this guy my mom used to date, Caleb, still lives out that way with his kids. Around midday, I decide to drive over and say hi. We sit around talking like no time passed, catch up on life, laugh about dumb old memories. We even crack a couple beers just because it feels like one of those rare moments where you can breathe. And then, out of nowhere, I get the urge. I kind of want to go walk my old running route, I tell Caleb, just for the nostalgia. He's like, "Yeah, man, go for it." It's quiet in the exact same way I remembered. Fields stretching wide on both sides. The road just cutting forward like it never ends. A light breeze moves through the grass. No cars, no people, just that big, open silence. And I'm walking, thinking about how that road used to be my whole world. When suddenly, I get hit. Not like bumped, not like I tripped, like I got tackled. My body jerks and I stumble, and my phone flies out of my hand and skitters into the gravel. I'm stunned, heart thudding, brain scrambling for an explanation, because there's nobody around. I don't even have time to fully push myself upright before I hear a voice, right above me. "My bad, sir. I didn't see anyone else around here." I freeze, because I know that voice. I know that exact line. I grab for my phone, my fingers shaking, and I hear myself say, automatically, like it's already scripted, "All good." Then I look up, and the entire world tilts. It's a kid, 19, breathing hard from a run, earbuds in, phone in hand. Same height I used to be, same face I used to have, same posture, same everything. It's me. Not looks like me, not reminds me of me. It is literally me, years younger, standing there with that confused, apologetic expression I remember making. Because I made it. My mouth goes bone dry. My chest tightens like I'm about to have a panic attack. I try to say something, anything, but it's like my body forgets how to speak. All I can do is lift my hand toward him, reaching out without thinking, like if I can touch him, then maybe my brain will have something solid to hold on to. He looks at my hand, gives this small, polite smile, like I'm just some stranger being weird, and says, "Take care, sorry again." Then he puts his earbuds back in, and he runs off. And I'm just standing there. For maybe 3 seconds, maybe 10, time didn't feel right. I'm trying to force my mind to make sense of what just happened. Then I snap out of it and yell the first name that comes to me, like shouting a name could anchor reality. "Eli! Hey, Eli, come back!" And I take off after him, sprinting down that open road. But here's the thing. It's a straight road, wide fields, nowhere to hide, no turns, no cars that picked him up, no trees thick enough to swallow a person. And still, he's gone. Just gone. Like the road ate him. I slowed to a stop, bent over with my hands on my knees, breathing like I'd been dropped into someone else's life. I kept scanning the horizon, waiting to see him crest a little rise or hear his footsteps. Nothing. Just the wind moving through the grass. And now, every time I replay it, it feels like a dream. But it doesn't behave like a dream. The details are too sharp. The fear I felt looking at him was too real. And the part that messes with me the most? I remember that day when I was 19, when I ran into that bearded man who looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. I remember his face, and I swear to you, I was looking at my own. So, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm still a little shaken up telling this. Yesterday, out of nowhere, I got this sudden urge to check on someone's well-being. And I know how that sounds. But it wasn't a normal, I should text a friend kind of thought. This was sharper. Almost like a flash of certainty that if I opened Instagram, I'd see one of those black and white photos with a caption that's basically a goodbye letter. The only problem was, I had no clue who it was supposed to be. And I spiraled a bit. I actually went so far as to pull up a couple obituary sites for my city, those public death registries that cover the metro area. I didn't find anything, which wasn't surprising. I live in a huge Brazilian city, millions of people. So even if the feeling did mean something, what were the odds the exact person would even show up there? Those sites don't catch every single death, right? But the feeling didn't go away. My brain kind of latched onto this woman named Renata, someone who used to run in the same social circles as me back in the day. Renata had struggled with mental health for years, and a while back, maybe like 8 or 9 months ago, she just disappeared from social media completely. And here's the thing, if you're Brazilian, you get it. Social media isn't just social media here. It's like proof of life. Having zero digital footprint is unusual, especially when you've got a ton of mutual friends. So my mind went there. What if something happened? I checked. Nothing. Not on her profile, not on family members' profiles, not even those indirect little clues people leave without meaning to. It was quiet, but not in a scary way, just quiet. And I remember thinking, okay, she's probably fine. Maybe she's taking a real break. Honestly, good for her. And I want to be clear, I had no concrete reason to believe anything had happened to Renata. It was just my mind trying to hang this weird feeling on someone. Then today, I found out that someone I used to know actually died yesterday. Her name was Marcia. Marcia used to work with me years ago at an English school where I was a coordinator. She was the kind of person you remember. Steady, friendly, that exhausted but still showing up energy. And the part that hit me hardest? She was a single mom with 2 teenagers. Just brutal. Really. She didn't even live near me anymore. She'd moved to the other side of the country, and I hadn't spoken to her in a long time. Over a year, maybe more. We weren't close friends. More like former co-workers who shared a real place in each other's daily life for a while. So now I'm sitting there thinking, why did I have that feeling yesterday? A couple details make it stick in my throat. For one, Marcia and Renata, this might sound weird, had a similar vibe. Not identical, but enough that my brain could have been circling Marcia without landing, and just grabbed the closest match it could identify. Similar face shape, similar intensity, even a kind of similar presence. I keep wondering if my mind recognized something and just couldn't name it. Second, today I did the obituary search again, except this time on a registry for the region where Marcia had been living. And listen, I clicked the first link that came up, and there she was. First try. And I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but combined with everything else, it felt eerie. Then I learned she'd been taken to the hospital yesterday morning, around the exact time I'd gotten hit with that wave of dread. I keep trying to be rational about it. Like, yes, I've worried about death before. I'm a human being. If my partner is driving late at night, I get anxious. If someone I love gets on a plane, I'll have that stupid little knot in my stomach even though flying is statistically safe. That's normal fear. And then there's the one small thread that connects me to Marcia, which is so random it almost feels like a movie prop. Back at the school, she kept this fantasy-themed board game. She was a huge nerd about it, in the best way. The students loved it. When she moved away, she left it behind. Later, when the school shut down, I found the game packed away in a closet, and I took it home instead of letting it get tossed. Last weekend, my wife and I re-watched a bunch of movies in that same adventure fantasy vibe, and afterward I remembered the board game. I dug it out, threw it in the trunk, thinking I'd bring it to a couple students I teach privately sometimes. Just a harmless, practical little decision. And I swear, when I held that box in my hands again, it was the first time I'd thought about Marcia in a long, long time. Like my brain pulled her name from the bottom of a drawer. So yeah, that's the whole thing. No dramatic ending, no revelation, just this lingering question that I can't quite swallow. Was it just coincidence? My anxious brain throwing darts into the dark and accidentally hitting something real? Or is there, I don't know, some kind of strange human antenna we don't understand yet? I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who might actually hear me. So, I grew up spending nearly every summer in Croatia. My family had this little house outside a seaside town. Not right in the middle of everything, but close enough that you could smell the pines and the salt in the air at the same time. And every year, like clockwork, I'd show up, sunburned within 2 days, and fall right back into the same friendships like no time had passed. There was this tradition the older kids passed down to the younger ones. You know the kind. Half adventure, half proof you're brave now. We'd hike up into the rocky hills behind the village. It's not one single mountain, more like a long, rugged ridge that keeps climbing and folding over itself. Up there, there's a wide, open pasture. Goats or sheep sometimes wandered through, and an old stone hut that had been abandoned for ages. Shepherds used to sleep there overnight back when people actually watched their flocks the old way. The hike itself wasn't that bad. Honestly, it was the kind of walk you could do while joking around and throwing pebbles at each other. Except for one spot. There's this section where the path narrows and you have to shuffle along the edge of what's basically a deep split in the rock, like a ravine or a crack that drops a few meters straight down. And at the bottom there are these big, ugly boulders, the kind you don't want to imagine landing on. It isn't technically a cliff, but it feels like one when you're a kid and you can't stop looking down. That day it was 4 of us at first, me and 3 friends, and we decided we were finally doing the hike to the hut on our own. On the way up, we passed the house of another friend, Luca. We spotted him out on the terrace, leaned over the fence and shouted up like, "Hey, we're heading up to the old hut, come with us." He grinned and said yes, like it was the easiest decision in the world. He grabbed his shoes, came down, and joined us. Just like that, 5 kids, laughing, sweating, feeling like explorers. Everything felt normal, completely normal. And then we reached that narrow part. I remember it so clearly because the air felt a little different there, quieter somehow, even though nothing changed. We went one by one, kind of sidestepping along the rock. Luca was behind us, and then, out of nowhere, he screamed. I don't even know how to describe it without sounding dramatic, but it wasn't a normal scream. It wasn't "I slipped" or "I'm scared" or "I hit my knee." It was a scream that sounded like someone dying, like the kind of sound your body understands before your brain does. A raw, animal, final kind of terror that went straight through us. We spun around and saw him fall, just drop out of sight into that split in the rock. And the scream kept going until it didn't, until there was this sudden, sickening silence after the impact. We froze, every one of us, like our brains refused to accept what we'd just watched. I remember my heart pounding so hard it made me feel dizzy. Someone kept saying his name, over and over, like saying it enough times would change what we'd seen. We crawled forward and looked down, but it was too deep, and the rocks below were twisted and uneven. No movement, no answer, nothing. We were kids, no phones, no way to call anyone, just those old little brick Nokias, and even then we didn't have them with us on the hike. So we did the only thing we could do. We ran. We ran back down the path like we were being chased, crying, shouting, tripping over stones, calling for help, not even caring if we fell ourselves. We didn't stop until we saw the first rooftops of the village. We sprinted past the gate, and I swear to you, my legs nearly gave out, because there he was, Luca, standing there with his parents, alive, calm, completely fine. I can still feel the way my stomach dropped when I saw him, like my body short-circuited. We just stared at him, gasping for breath, pale as sheets, eyes wide open like we'd seen a ghost. Because we had just seen him fall. We had heard him scream like he was dying. All 4 of us. The exact same scream. The exact same fall. The exact same awful silence afterward. For a split second, my brain tried to grab onto the idea that he'd somehow played a prank. But it didn't fit. You can't fake that kind of scream. You can't fake that kind of fall. And even if you could, how could he possibly be here already, without a scratch, without dirt on him, without even looking out of breath? His parents rushed toward us, alarmed, asking what happened, why we were crying, why we looked like that. And we just spilled it out, talking over each other, pointing back up the mountain, barely able to breathe. The adults didn't laugh. They didn't brush it off. They knew us. They could see our faces. They could hear it in our voices. That we weren't trying to tell some spooky story for attention. We were terrified. So the adults gathered people immediately and went up to that ravine. Their thinking was simple. Maybe it wasn't Luca. Maybe it was someone else. A tourist. Another local kid. Anyone. They searched for a long time. And they found nothing. No body. No injured person. No sign that anyone had fallen at all. And here's the part that still makes my skin prickle. While we were up there hearing that scream and watching him die, Luca was apparently in town with his parents, running errands, completely elsewhere, like it was an ordinary afternoon. To this day, people from that village still bring it up sometimes. Not in a campfire story way, but in that quiet, uneasy way people talk about something they genuinely can't explain. And the four of us who were on that path, we've never forgotten it. Not the image of him dropping out of sight, not the way the world went silent afterward, but especially not the scream. That scream stays with you. And the strangest thing is, we're not the kind of people who go chasing paranormal explanations. None of us were raised to believe in that stuff. Even now, I don't sit here claiming I know it was something supernatural. But I also can't pretend it didn't happen. If it had only been me, I might have convinced myself over the years that my mind invented it. Some weird childhood panic, a misheard sound, imagination running wild. But it wasn't only me. It was all of us. 4 kids, hearing the same scream, seeing the same fall, carrying the same shock in our faces when we reached the village. Luca's fine. He grew up. He's living his life. But in a way, it still feels like we lost him that day, even though we didn't. Like some version of him died in front of us on that rock, and we're the only ones who remember it. And every time I think back to it, the first thing I hear isn't my own voice or my friends shouting for help. It's that scream. That terrible, impossible scream. So, this is a little hard to talk about, but I'll try. My Lolo, my grandpa, passed away earlier this month. It was natural causes, and he was surrounded by family over in California. I'm here in the Philippines, and growing up, my grandparents were always doing this back and forth life. They'd fly home to see us whenever they could, then return to the States. They were immigrants already back then, but they still somehow kept one foot in both worlds. What's wild is, we're still living on the property they helped establish here. Like the land they secured years ago is the same place where we built our home. So even when he was far away, he still felt present in a way. In the walls, in the routines, in the "this is our family's place" feeling. He hadn't been back since around 2019. He kept saying he wanted to come home for good, like really settle here again. But the pandemic happened, and after that, his health just never bounced back. Plans kept getting postponed, then eventually, there was no more someday. The day he died, I didn't really show much. You know how sometimes you're numb first? Like your body is calm, but inside you're shaking. Everyone in the family was grieving, but I was quiet about it. I remember that night, late, already half asleep, just lying in my room when I heard it. A knock. Not a tiny tap. Not a "maybe the house moved" kind of sound. It was one solid knock, medium to loud, right on my bedroom door. It jolted me awake because nobody knocks like that at that hour. I sat up immediately, heart racing, and went to open the door. And there was no one. I stepped out into the hallway to check. Empty. Quiet. My younger brother was still awake in the next room, scrolling on his phone, so I asked him, "Did you knock?" He looked at me like I was weird and said, "No?" And I could tell he meant it. He was half asleep and annoyed in that genuine way people get when you wake them up with something random. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the house creaked. Maybe it was just one of those things. But then it happened again. A couple nights later, my dad experienced it in their room. He told us he heard 2 knocks this time, 2 distinct ones, like someone knocking, pausing, then knocking again. The first time, he got up and checked outside the room, then even went downstairs thinking maybe someone was messing around. Nothing. So he went back up to sleep, and then it happened again, same pattern. The second set of knocks was softer, but still clear enough that he couldn't ignore it. Then, a day or so after that, my mom heard it too. She was getting ready, like dressing, doing her usual routine, and she heard a knock and assumed someone downstairs was calling her. So she called back, "Yeah?" No answer. She went out to check, thinking someone needed something, but everyone was busy doing their own thing, no one even near her door. And then, it came back to me. Just 3 nights ago, I was in my room with my boyfriend, Miguel, and our dog. We were watching a show, Netflix, lights low, totally relaxed. Our dog was lying there, calm, not even restless. Then we heard it. 2 soft knocks on the door, gentle, but unmistakable, like someone trying not to startle us. I froze. Miguel looked at me immediately like, "Did you hear that?" I didn't even answer right away because my brain was doing that thing where it tries to explain it before it lets you feel anything. I got up, opened the door fast, and again, nobody. Hallway empty, house quiet. Because I've lived in this house basically my whole life. I'm 26 now, and in all those years I've never had anything like this happen. Not once. And now it happens, first on the day he dies, then again to my dad, then my mom, then back to me. I don't know what I believe. I'm not saying it's definitely something paranormal. I'm not claiming it's my grandpa for sure. But the timing feels personal. Like the house is doing something it never used to do. And honestly, I think what scares me isn't just the knocking. It's what it might mean. Like, is it a goodbye? A reminder? A sign that grief is louder than we think, even when we're trying to be quiet about it. I guess I'm sharing this because I don't know what to do with it. Has anyone else experienced something like that? Knocking with no one there, especially after losing someone? And if you have, how did you handle it without spiraling? Because right now, I'm stuck between wanting an explanation and wanting to believe it was him, just letting us know he made it home in some way. So, recently I was talking with a friend about death, about people passing, and it brought me right back to something I don't tell many people. When I was 15, I lost my older sister, Maya. She died from an overdose when she was 29, and even saying that out loud still feels sharp, like it has edges. She was genuinely one of the best people I've ever known. The kind of person you just orbit when you're younger because she makes life feel bigger and cooler and safer all at once. I idolized her. She had this beat-up truck that she treated like a concert venue, upgraded speakers, bass you could feel in your ribs, and she'd let me sit there with her while she played music way too loud, rapping along and laughing like nothing in the world could touch her. To me, she was the definition of fearless. She had gone to rehab. She was trying. She really was. And then she relapsed, hard. And that relapse is what took her from us. There's a lot that happened leading up to it. Details I keep close, because some things just don't belong on the internet. But I'll say this. It was a shock that didn't just knock the wind out of our family. It rearranged us. About a month after she died, I had this dream. And I know people say dreams feel real, but this was different. It wasn't fuzzy or symbolic. It felt like she was there. In the dream, I was holding her, hugging her so tightly I could feel that familiar shape of her shoulders, like my body remembered her before my mind did. We were both crying, ugly crying, the kind where you can't even talk right. It was gut-wrenching, but also strangely calm underneath it, like something sacred was happening. And right before I woke up, I remember her pulling back just a little, just enough to look at me, and she said, really clearly, "I have to go now." I woke up sobbing, like I sat straight up and the tears were already happening, as if I'd been crying in the real world too. I don't even know why, but I got out of bed immediately and walked into the living room. It was still early, quiet house, dim light, that heavy stillness you get before the day fully starts. And my mom, Denise, was already there. She was standing in the living room like she'd been placed there, almost frozen. Her face was puffy, eyes red. She'd been crying too. We just stared at each other for a second, and it was like we both knew before we spoke. And then, at the exact same time, we asked each other, "Did you dream about her?" We both said yes. And here's the part I still get chills thinking about. We described the dream, and it matched. The hug, the crying, how real it felt. And then my mom said, "What did she say at the end?" And I told her. And my mom's face crumpled because she whispered, "She said that to me too. I have to go now." Same words, same ending, same wake up, sobbing, same pull toward the living room, same moment of finding each other there. We didn't even try to explain it. We just fell into each other and cried like we were holding on to the only solid thing in the world. It was one of the most bittersweet moments of my life, because I never wanted to say goodbye, not really. But it felt like she reached for us, like she gave us something we didn't get to have the first time, a goodbye we could share together. And now, I'm older than she ever got to be. That's such a strange sentence to live inside of. There are days it hits me out of nowhere, like I'll be doing something normal, laughing at something stupid, and then it's like my brain remembers, she never made it to this age. She never got to see this part. I miss her. All the time. So yeah, I guess I'm asking you honestly. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Something that felt less like a dream and more like a moment you were given? Okay, this has been stuck in my head ever since it happened, and I still don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying it was definitely paranormal. Honestly, half of me is skeptical, and the other half is like, yeah, but what if it wasn't nothing? So this was a couple months back. We'd just had our little boy, Milo, and he was around 5 months old at the time, right in the thick of teething. You know that stage where they look so tiny and sweet, but they're also miserable and nobody sleeps? That was us. That day in particular was brutal. I'd been on baby duty for hours, rocking him, walking around the house, trying different bottles, pacing the hallway like a zombie. By the time night came, I was completely wrung out. And when you're that tired, your brain starts telling you stuff. I kept thinking I was messing everything up, like I was failing him, like I wasn't cut out for being a dad. Eventually, I managed to settle Milo down. The house finally went quiet. My partner, Tessa, was asleep, and I remember lying there thinking, okay, just sleep. Please just let me sleep. And that's when it happened. At first, it was this deep humming sensation inside my body. Not like a noise in the room, like something in me, like my chest and ribs were vibrating. Then it got stronger. It spread until it felt like every inch of me was buzzing, like my whole body had turned into a speaker and someone had cranked the bass way too high. Then I realized I could actually hear it too. Not just feel it, hear it, faintly, like a low electric drone. And right after that came this really unsettling feeling, like something was pressing against my mind. Like, I don't know how else to say it, like something was trying to force its way into my head, and I was fighting it. Not physically, mentally. Like I was trying to keep a door shut and something on the other side was pushing harder and harder. For a few seconds, 5, maybe 10, it felt like a struggle. Like I was thinking, no, no, get out, stop. And then suddenly, it was like I lost my grip, like the door gave way. And the moment it did, the vibrations surged. It wasn't just buzzing anymore. It was intense, like wind blasting through me, like my whole body was being shaken from the inside. And then there was sound, this high-pitched, chaotic talking. That's what it felt like a voice, but not in any language I knew. Just this rapid, sharp, almost squealing gibberish whipping around my head, like I was caught in some kind of mental whirlpool and the noise was circling me. I remember thinking, what is happening to me? And then, right at the end, everything cut through into one clear sentence, in calm, perfectly understandable English. You're doing a good job. That's it. Just those words. And the second I heard them, it was like something unclenched inside me. All the fear drained out. It wasn't just relief. It was this wave of calm that washed over everything. Like reassurance so strong it felt physical. Like someone had put a hand on my shoulder and meant it. And then, instantly, everything stopped. The vibration, the sound, the pressure. Gone. Like someone flipped a switch. I was just me again. Lying in bed, quiet room, no humming, no voice. Alone in my own head, fully in control. I've had sleep paralysis before, which is why part of me tries to file it under that. But it wasn't like my usual episodes. Normally, I'm asleep first and then I wake up stuck. This time it happened right as I was drifting off. And I've never had anything like a voice, especially not something that felt separate from my own thoughts. And sleep paralysis has always been negative for me. Creepy, dark, that awful dread. This was the complete opposite. It scared me at first, but the ending was weirdly beautiful. What I do know is this: those words stuck. They actually helped. Even now, on the hard days, I remember that sentence. You're doing a good job. And it still hits the same. And if it was a message, then it showed up at the exact right time. Hey, so I've been going back and forth on whether to tell this out loud, because once I say it, it feels more real. But I'm gonna try to explain it the way it actually felt, not the way it sounds on paper. I'm 22, I'm a Christian, and weird things have followed me for as long as I can remember. I've had dreams that later happen, like exactly happen. Sometimes it's years later and it hits me like a punch because the scene is identical, down to tiny details. I'll catch shadows in mirrors or reflections in storefront windows, even when I know no one's there. And I've heard people in my house, doors opening, footsteps, murmuring. Sometimes even voices that sound like my family. When I'm home, completely alone. And then there are moments that just don't make sense. Like a few months ago, I was in this little local shop and someone whispered my name behind me. My name isn't common either. My boyfriend at the time, Evan, heard it too. We both turned around expecting to see somebody we knew, and there was nobody. No one even looking our way. Nothing. I've got more stories than I'd like to admit, but the worst thing, by far, happened about 2 years ago at Evan's family place. It's out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by this huge stretch of land, fields, woods, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. It was one of those nights where he had a few friends over. I'd been at work, and I was genuinely excited to swing by and hang out. Like, I remember driving out there feeling happy, normal, light. And then the second I pulled in, it was like someone flipped a switch in me. I got irritated, immediately. And not in a normal, long day way. I mean instant, sharp anger. Like it had been sitting there waiting. Which is not me. I'm usually upbeat, calm. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't high, nothing. Completely sober. But within maybe 10, 15 minutes, I felt like I couldn't stand being around anyone. So I went inside and laid down in a back room, thinking, okay, I'll rest for a second. Reset. It was around 9 p.m. I fell asleep, and then woke up feeling like I'd only been asleep a few minutes. My pant leg was pushed up a little, and I felt this pressure, like fingers lightly touching my leg. I jerked, pulled the fabric down, told myself I was half dreaming, and I grabbed a blanket and tried to go back to sleep. Then I woke up again. This time, it wasn't touch. It was that awful feeling of being watched, like the air itself is staring at you. I opened my eyes and expected to see Evan standing there messing with me, but the room was empty. Across from the bed there was this open closet. No door, just a dark cutout in the wall. And above it, mounted on the wall nearby, was this deer head that his family had up like a trophy. I turned my eyes toward the closet, and I swear my whole body locked. Because the closet wasn't just dark. The darkness looked thick, like it had texture. And then it started to move. This oily, smoky kind of mass, like black fog but heavier, was slowly spilling out of it. Not rushing, just emerging, like it had all the time in the world. And what freaks me out even more is I didn't feel like I could move right. I've never had sleep paralysis before, but that's the closest thing I can compare it to. Like my body was heavy and delayed, and my brain was screaming while my muscles wouldn't cooperate. I forced myself to look away, but that didn't help, because when I turned my head forward, I ended up staring right into the deer head's glassy eyes. And suddenly, I had this overwhelming certainty that it was watching me. Like it wasn't an object anymore. Like it was aware. And I wish that had been the end. But it wasn't even close. I woke up again. Evan was standing there, checking on me. He looked confused, like, why aren't you outside with us? And I don't know how to explain what happened next except to say, it didn't feel like me speaking. I snapped at him. I started yelling, telling him to leave me alone, that I didn't want him around, that I needed to be by myself. It was cruel. It was so out of character that part of me was sitting somewhere behind my own eyes, watching it happen, like, why are you doing this? Stop. Stop. It felt like being stuck in the passenger seat of my own body, watching someone else drive. He backed off, clearly hurt and confused, and he left me alone because he thought I'd had a rough day. I fell asleep again. Then I woke up again, and he came back, gentle, still trying to understand. And the moment I saw him, this wave of hatred washed over me so strong it felt physical. It was like someone poured something black and bitter into my chest. Every word that came out of my mouth was disgust. I remember hearing myself talk and thinking, that's not me. That's not how I feel about him. But I couldn't stop it. At some point, I got up and went into the bathroom and laid down in the bathtub, like curled up in it, trying to shrink into somewhere small. I felt wrong. My skin felt wrong. My thoughts didn't feel like they belonged to me. I felt split, like my body was there, but me was hovering just behind my face. And then something happened that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. I fell asleep in the tub and woke up abruptly. And I sat up with this big, eerie smile on my face. I wasn't smiling because I was happy. I was crying, but my face was smiling like a mask. Internally, I was panicking because I didn't understand why my mouth was doing that. I felt trapped inside my own expression. And then, clear as day, this thought slid into my head. in a voice that didn't feel like my voice. I could go into the kitchen, grab a knife, and no one would even know until it was too late. I need you to understand. I hadn't had thoughts like that since I was a kid, and even then it wasn't like this. This wasn't an intrusive thought that felt like anxiety. This felt planted, foreign, calm in a way that made it worse. The fear that hit me was primal, like my soul recoiled. I stood up, crying, and stumbled outside. The yard was empty. I couldn't see Evan or his friends. I just knew I needed to get away from that house, off that land, anywhere else. I got in my car and started it. I honked the horn over and over, hoping someone would hear me, but it was like the night swallowed the sound. Later, Evan swore he was back in the woods behind the house and had no idea how he didn't hear the engine or the horn. After a minute, I panicked and started driving down the long gravel driveway. And then, out of nowhere, I slammed on the brakes so hard the car slid, and I started screaming. Not crying screaming, rage screaming. I was yelling, "I hate him. I hate Evan. He did this. I hate him." Over and over, like something was forcing the words through me, because I didn't even know what this was supposed to mean. I didn't know why I was saying it. I didn't feel like I was choosing any of it. Then it stopped. The rage drained out of me like someone pulled a plug, and all that was left was fear, pure, shaking fear. And I knew there was someone in the back seat. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I didn't see him. When I turned around, there was nothing. But it didn't matter. I knew he was there anyway, the same way you know when someone is standing too close behind you. I don't even remember deciding to go back. I just did, like the car turned itself. I drove back up and pulled behind one of the buildings. I got out and stood there crying, but I couldn't speak. It was like my throat had sealed shut. A few seconds later, Evan and his friends came running out of the woods, confused and alarmed. Evan came right up to me and looked at my face, really looked, and he said, quiet but certain, "You saw something in the closet." I didn't answer. "It made you think things that weren't yours," he said. I still couldn't answer. I couldn't even nod. I just stood there shaking. And then he turned to his friends and said, "I'm not answering questions. I'm driving her off the property. Follow me and pick me up at the end of the driveway." He put me in the passenger seat and we drove. And this is the part that messes with me the most, because it was so sharp and instant that I can't explain it away. The moment the gravel ended and the tires hit the paved road, right at the edge of the property line, it was like everything snapped off. The fear, the heaviness, the watched feeling, the anger, the wrongness in my body. Gone. Like somebody rinsed me clean. I looked over at Evan and suddenly I felt like myself again. Like the girl who'd been excited to see him, the girl who'd been happy on the drive in. And I remember sitting there thinking, how can it be gone that fast? How can it be that location matters? After that, I didn't go into that house alone again. I still don't. I don't go out on that land by myself. If I'm there, it's only with someone else, and even then I'm tense the whole time. Sometimes we still hear things, little things, enough to keep the memory fresh. For a long time, I told myself I sounded crazy. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family, because how do you say, I didn't feel in control of my own mind without watching someone's eyes change? But I haven't been the same since. I've leaned harder into my faith. I don't go anywhere without my cross now. And I know how dramatic that sounds, but I also know what I lived through. And the truth is, I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing voices when I'm alone, tired of seeing things in reflections, tired of walking around waiting for the next moment that doesn't make sense. I just want to know I'm not the only person who's been through something like this. Because once you feel like something else has had its hands on your thoughts, it's hard to pretend you're the same afterward.